people of Triton rushed in to save a man who'd been slammed by a brutal iron beam. All he wanted was a quiet life, but one crushing failure after another pushed him into a brutal, meaningless death. Everything slammed down so fast, and now the dead has a second shot at life, waking up in the body of a baby named Zed. Right before reincarnation, he bumped into a guide waiting between life and death, someone who knew his brutal past inside out and chose to help him anyway. The guide leaned in and told him, "With this new body, you'll unlock a special status and a whole set of sweet privileges. He'll carry every memory of the past with him and gain protection fit for a reborn soul," but the hero was hit with too much information to take it all in before time ran out. The real treasure wasn't money or power, it was the evaluative eye, a brutally useful ability that made his new life click into place. They built this power just for him, and the guide straight up told him to gear up for his rebirth, right now, as fast as he could. He likened it to hitting the world lottery, except this time, he didn't get to choose the numbers, he had to accept his new fate. The guide swore the new world would hand him luck he'd never even imagined, because in his mind, life's mysterious current was begging to carry him straight to destiny. Then the hero dropped into the endless void. Just before everything went dark, he heard the wish for a happy life one last time and saw the guide's radiant smile glow back at him. Waking up helpless like a baby who can't move a muscle feels wildly wrong, but right there, the mother's love wraps around him, warm and protective, like a soft blanket that won't let go. Even the maid doted on him like he was her own kid, then practically begged Mr. Gilbert to be gentler so the little one wouldn't get scared. Little Zick, everyone's cute nickname for him, couldn't stop staring and wondering about every single movement around, though he couldn't walk or talk yet. The guide blurted out, "Listen, this world is nothing like the one you know, and you'll have to master every rule and feature one step at a time." The convict couldn't stop himself from poking at the mystery of his evaluative eye, this insane gift that was meant to blow open his perception of the brand new world. Just the thought of that power sent his way a burst of information, windows upon windows snapping open in front of him. Everything looked like an RPG. Every window was packed with crucial stats that defined how real languages worked in the game world. That luck stat just screamed chaos, an insane 200, but when Zek compared the rest, he realized, for now, he was nothing but dead weight in this world. Right then, Mary and Enshiabold, two dazzling young beauties, strode into the room, and Maid Anna immediately warned them, "Please be careful." They stood out with silvery hair and violet eyes, exactly like their mother. Once Zek got used to his tiny body, he surprised everyone by snatching his sister's hand, and that shocked Enshiabold to his core. Miriam swore she'd look after her little brother, and both sisters started plotting how to show him their favorite toys. While the girls bickered over what toy to grab next, Zek got hit with their wild energy, and swore that from that day on, the sisters would never be apart. Enshiabal and Miriam swore they'd play with him nonstop the moment he grew up a little. Miriam thanked fate like it granted a miracle, because Zek had shown up and was now living right in their family. At that exact moment, Zek finally understood how lucky he was, because his own family wrapped him in care, warmth, and pure happiness. Right there, the parents started trading whispers about the mysterious awakening, an obvious ritual of huge importance. Gilbert's father drowned everything in negativity, while his mom, Lyra, brought up Willie, Gilbert's brother, and Zek immediately clocked it. They were talking about his uncle. Gilbert praised Willie as a solid, trustworthy knight, saying he'd made huge strides, while Enshiabold snapped, asking whether Zek could dodge the awakening. His father warned him straight up, every aristocrat has to go through awakening, and Zek won't get a choice. He must master magic or martial arts. Enshiabold refused to let her little brother develop big powers, because that exact kind of ability once dragged their brother Gert straight into the magical academy. Ever since then, Gert's been glued to studying nonstop, barely making it home, because that ability assessment system would not let him breathe. Gilbert was sure his son had talent, but he also knew he couldn't shield him anymore, so this time, he swore he'd never make the same mistake again. In a world where gifted kids get shipped off to academies, Zek refused to let go of the warmth of his family. Meanwhile, Zek was hunched in bed, wrestling with his settings. Then it hit him, he might pull in attention any moment. By tomorrow, he needs to move, because if he drags his feet, he's heading straight for the next test subject in that magical institution. Life in a loving family was the one thing he craved, and Zek fully threw his heart into wanting to stay home. Suddenly, a mysterious voice cut through the air, and the stranger called him Sir, telling him the assistant function was already up and running. The assistant leaned in and said the hero still hasn't mastered the evaluative eye, and that gap is an insane advantage waiting to be unlocked. He also told him to mask the truth, because the better you can disguise your real status, the better your odds. The assistant brought up status concealment, and Zek's curiosity snapped to attention instantly. But right then, he wasn't ready to pull the trigger, and he had no clue how he was supposed to act. The assistant pushed training, saying this feature might show up as early as tomorrow, yet Zek didn't buy it for a second. Then the assistant shoved the hero's gaze at the 1,000 points of blessing, except Zek just couldn't figure out how to use them. Turns out you can cash those points in to unlock useful skills, like hiding your status. The inmate was itching to grab them right away, but the assistant snapped, "Hold up, use caution," because those same points would be needed later. The boy refused to lose the family that loved him, and the assistant backed his choice to stay. The very next day, Willie showed up at the estate, grinning like he'd finally come home to the walls that built him. His popularity was insane. Every maid practically beamed just having him around. He was absolutely thrilled to see Lara again. He hadn't laid eyes on her in ages, but the warmth between them still hit like home. With a grin, Willie leaned in and told his brother, "Don't get jealous, your wife is seriously breathtaking." Lyra beamed with joy the moment her son was born, and Willie stepped in to celebrate with them, grinning at the pure, bright miracle. That's why the hero showed up, because he couldn't resist seeing the newborn. Cradling Zek in his arms, Willie blurted that he was family, his uncle, and he'd always be right there. The little boy scanned the room with shaking nerves, and Willie couldn't believe it. He looked just like his charming mom. Zek didn't just inherit Lyra's traits, he even got her rare eye color. Uncle Willie lifted the evaluative eye to test the kid's skills, and Zek got hit with a sudden wave of fear. That relative's unblinking stare bore into him, and a knot of discomfort and anxiety tightened in his chest. The boy was dead set on hiding his powers, even as his father and uncle were already waiting for the results. Then Uncle Willie finally declared the kid had no high attributes at all, and Gilbert let out a huge, shaking breath of relief. The convict practically beamed at that outcome, and his tension melted into real calm. By masking his true status like a pro, he kept his real strength out of sight, letting only ordinary abilities sit in plain view while his true power stayed hidden. Willie pointed out that the baby had traits like his mother, and the whole family exploded with joy. The parents bowed their heads and thanked God for every answered prayer, because their son was finally coming home and staying right there. The convict scrawled in his letter that he didn't just bury his true power, he also found a way to win over his relatives. Now he could finally savor the life he never got in his past world, while Willie kept on with the examination. Suddenly magic flared around Zek's body, then real, crackling wings of energy burst open behind him. Willie told the baby he was truly blessed. Those wings meant divine favor, but the father's worry flared up again. Zek froze when his uncle dropped the truth. This kid had monstrous magical power. The boy felt the plan unraveling, but he still didn't see how close the danger was getting. Willie swore Zek's magic was way beyond anything he'd ever had back when he was still at his peak. But that was the terrifying catch. If the Ministry of Magic ever found out, they'd snatch the boy away. The convict's breath caught again. He swore he wouldn't fall into his old mistakes, but fate tightened its grip, and freedom started slipping away all over again. Willie singled him out as a special kid, and that magical potential of his was so wild it was basically impossible to measure. Those words hit like a thunderclap, shocking the father, and filling the mother's eyes with instant worry. The convict figured that, even with this kind of luck, he'd still barely claw his way out of this mess. Gilbert's uncle leaned in and swore that God had handpicked him for an extraordinary son, then dug up an old legend about an angel who once stepped into the world as a man. Willie urged they send the boy to the academy, but Gilbert shut it down hard, categorically no. The convict didn't want to abandon this kind family, but he had no clue how to fix it all on his own. Lyra couldn't stop grinning, because the truth was, she was genuinely overjoyed that her son was truly special. She was convinced Zek would grow into an unstoppable force, strong enough to break nothing, ever. And still, no matter what stood in her way, the mother begged, pleading with everything in her heart, for him to never step foot into the magical academy. Gilbert threw himself behind her and swore he'd protect their son at any cost. During the official assessment, their son wouldn't be able to hide his magic level at all. Willie urged everyone to map out Zek's abilities and figure out who he truly was. Then Zek, soaking up every word from the adults, started to finally grasp the rules of this world. Willie told Gilbert that the safest move was to keep the boy's strength a complete secret, and that advice hit Gilbert like a shock. In the end, both brothers clung to the secret and played it cool, acting like magic was never real. For the first time in his life, Zek felt it. He mattered, he was needed, and someone depended on him, and that rush was something he'd never felt before. Lyra stared ahead with hope in her eyes, praying her son would always stay right by her side. Willie named it the Secret of Five and demanded each of them swear, on pain of everything, to keep their mouths shut. Out of nowhere, Uncle Caldos burst into the doorway. He'd caught the whole conversation, and that totally blindsided Gilbert. When the door swung open, two curious sisters, Enchibold and Mariana, were right there, and their father couldn't believe the trick they pulled. He sharply told his daughters that eavesdropping on adults was shameful and flat-out unworthy behavior. The girls decided to stand together, so they took the fall and blamed everything on themselves. Willie grinned and asked, "Do they really care that much about their brother?" And the sisters snapped the truth out. He wasn't someone they wanted to lose, and they admitted, straight from their hearts, that the guilt was theirs. Lyra praised the girls for their honesty, then promised them that their dad and uncle would stop at nothing to protect Zek. The love pouring in from his relatives hit him like a wave, and he broke down in tears, crying tears of pure happiness. Meanwhile, Willie fired off a strict warning to the sisters: "Don't you dare tell a single soul about this conversation. If they break their word, punishment is coming straight for them." Still, Zek couldn't stop gushing about his uncle, and that joy sent Mariana and Enchibold into pure panic. Of course, the girls swore they'd stay quiet, then Willie trusted their loyalty and called it in. And just like that, it was his word, and Gilbert only grinned, completely sure of his daughters. Then Willie blared Zek's so-called ordinary traits to the whole crowd, and just like that, the government lost interest in him for the magical academy. Months tore by, then the baby grew up fast, and once unknown days turned into a brand new world he couldn't stop exploring. He flashed back to a past life packed with pain, and still he called himself truly lucky, and even the assistant backed him up. The one-eyed assistant snapped. That memory is exactly what kept Zek in the family, and to make it happen, he had to burn 444 blessing points. The advisor leaned in and told him this. In his past life, Zek died by pure accident, but now that same tragedy turned him into something special in this new world. The assistant was certain God had marked Zek for something special, and it was the first time the boy ever heard a claim like that. Even though he'd technically known it all before, the words still wouldn't let him breathe. The thought wouldn't let him go. What if this whole world was stacked against him? The inmate tried to pry for a real taste of adult talk, but the magic advisor shut them down today. He was obsessed with books, stacked full of beginner magic textbooks, and the boy tore into every page with pure, burning enthusiasm. Madana, the maid, blinked in shock when he turned out to be a book lover, then rushed to bring him more thrilling volumes. He was absolutely crazy about them, somehow. Even the weird, unfamiliar language clicked in his head like he'd known it forever. Now it was time to master magic for real, and the assistant straight up promised they'd teach him how to use it effectively. In just the last month, Zek soaked up a ton of useful know-how, because this world has 12 magical attributes, and to even begin, you've got to master at least a few. It hit him: mix the right traits together, and you can forge brand new powers out of thin air. There were all these different kinds of power, and the whole world of magic and spells felt like a jaw-dropping fantasy come to life. But if those attributes don't click together just right, the magic won't spark at all, so you've got to name the exact combinations with total precision. Every magician has their own brand of magic, but for beginners, the very first thing they have to master is: this light can smash through darkness, so you better train at night, especially when the moon is blazing. That's when Zek snapped back to his past life, remembering how fireflies once lit his path, and that spark in his memory sharpened his focus. Thanks to pure focus, the boy summoned his very own magical fireflies, and the moment they blinked to life, the whole room erupted in glowing light. Joy exploded in him. This wasn't just a win, it was his first real victory, and everything he learned from the past world paid off big time. The prisoner buzzed with excitement. Finally, he felt like he wasn't just stuck behind bars, but living inside a magical world he couldn't wait to explore even more. He even tried to forge a light as blinding as the sun, so his magical energy could flood everything around him. The light blasted so bright it made his eyes sting, and from that moment on, Zek decided to move with way more caution. Still, that boy couldn't stop craving answers. Every single day, he pushed to learn everything he could about magical energy and what it really was. Right then, Gilbert burst into the room and froze in shock at what his son was doing. In the next room, Lyra spoke softly to Anna, staring at a portrait of her older son, Gert, and the ache of missing him hung in the air. Suddenly, Gilbert burst in, yelling at everyone. Zek can already stand on his own legs. Anna was stunned by the host's behavior. No one barges in shouting like that. Still, Gilbert grinned, thrilled to prove just how capable his son really was. Lyra, on the contrary, wasn't even offended. She was touched clear to the core, and pride flooded her heart. But Zek himself got rattled by all that attention. He knew it had to be magic, yet he couldn't shake the fear that having power like that at such a young age just wasn't normal. Zek's father figured the boy would start walking any moment, but Zek clenched up. He refused to expose himself because one slip could trigger suspicion. Meanwhile, he didn't want to set his mom off, so he steeled himself and tried taking his very first steps. It was brutal. His body still looked too small and awkward, but he pushed through anyway, fighting with everything he had. And finally, he burst through the finish line and made it. Gilbert was bursting with pride over his son's victories and practically gushed, calling him a truly special child. But Zek didn't want the spotlight. He only stepped into it to make his parents smile. Right then, the butler suddenly popped in and, with a wink, teased Gilbert for dodging again. He wouldn't let it go day after day. He kept pressing the master to come back to the office and wrap up those urgent matters. But Gilbert grumbled under his breath, then reluctantly gave in and headed to work. Lyra leaned in and promised her husband, "Don't worry, I'll take Zek myself," because he still had too much on his plate to be dragged into this. The steward kept grumbling, barking that every job had to be finished no matter what, while Gilbert just swallowed his pride, apologized, and slipped straight into his office. Once Lyra was gone, she fired off a request to Anna, "Get books for Zek," and Anna just grinned because the maid had already stacked the perfect volumes. The prisoner daydreamed about growing up faster, craving more magic chances, and praying he'd dodge even more awkward trouble. That mom, of course, urged him to rest, because the boy had to rebuild his strength before he pushed on. Lyra was a deeply devoted mother, and she couldn't wait for the day her baby would grow up strong, smiling, and safe. In his mother's warm arms, Zek finally felt calm, and Lyra grinned softly, swearing that her son would become the best in the whole world. But her gaze felt eerie. She prayed her son would grow up unchained, never bowing to the country's rules, because the trials waiting for him were already closing in. Lyra looked at him and said he was special. He was meant to grow stronger and braver than anyone, so he'd never have to lean on anyone else. Tears welled up out of nowhere as she swore she'd always stay by his side, begging for his dreams to finally land and for him to stay free. She clutched her son close, eyes shining with a heartfelt hope for his happiness, like this was a painful goodbye, and she was trying to press one last, crucial message into his soul. Suddenly, Lyra crumpled and passed out, no chance to even get a word out, and the maid who burst into the room sent the books crashing to the floor in pure terror. Anna fought to snap the lady back to reality, but nothing worked. Then Zek, stunned, had no idea what was happening. A few days later, a letter from his father dropped off at the magical academy of Gert, and the young mage wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. Even after all that, the messenger still pushed him to read the letter, because it carried the news of his mother's death, and it hit like a hammer. The boy just stared, unable to process what he'd heard, like some awful, impossible nightmare had torn reality in half. He dumped every task he had at the academy and sprinted home for the funeral, while the elder son seethed with hatred, scanning with sharp eyes for whoever was to blame. Everyone was left reeling by Lyra's sudden death, and they all poured out condolences to Gilbert, yet Gert simply couldn't make it sink in. The funeral sat heavy with real grief. Willie truly mourned and begged his brother to rest a bit, but Gilbert only snapped back. That he was fine, yet Willie saw the truth after his beloved wife died. His brother looked completely drained, like every ounce of energy had been wrung out of him. Gilbert couldn't shut his eyes. Without Lyra, all his mind fixated on one thing, the children's safety, and nothing else mattered. Anna stayed with the kids and tried to steady them, but her own tears were barely held in check. The convict feared his mother was gravely ill, yet his heart refused to accept the cruel truth that he'd lost her right after birth. Lyra was sweet and radiant, so beautiful and gentle that nobody ever guessed she was fighting a terminal illness. The convict was crushed by the fact that he couldn't use the evaluative eye to help at all. To his mother, the moment hit him again, worthless, like he was doomed to repeat the same old loser fate, just treading the same path. Alberto leaned in and asked T where her brother had vanished, because right now, everyone needed to be together. The girl figured Gert had already gotten there, then she hurried off to say her goodbyes to his mother. So yeah, Gert slipped back to the estate, but completely ghosted everyone, even Taya. Devastation hit him like a truck, and he started snapping at everyone, so he begged his sister to stop talking to him. And just like that, rage surged through him, and he cast magic at the little one. Anna sprinted in front to shield the family's younger son, while Zek stood there baffled, unable to wrap his head around why his brother had attacked him. Hurt hurled lightning arrows straight at the child, and the rage behind them was unlike anything anyone had ever seen, so strong that even Anna didn't know what to do. Everyone in the room sprinted to stop the enraged mage, because one swing could have wiped out Zek and more. Anna, the arrows finally landed on the boy, and the sisters shot up at once. Get help, he needs healing magic. But Gert wouldn't calm down. He snapped that nobody could stop him, blamed Zek for the death of his beloved mother, and then set his sights on getting rid of his own brother. Gert was convinced it all started with Zek's birth. He watched their mother's health crash, then pinned her death on his little brother. He refused to hear a single explanation. Pure rage swallowed his thoughts and drowned out every shred of common sense. Alberto rushed in to stop the enraged mage, but the attack smashed through his defenses, and it even hurt him, just as he fought to shield everyone else. A few minutes later, Gilbert and Willie burst into the room, stunned beyond words by what they were seeing. Willie fired off healing magic the second it hit, rushing to save Anna and Zek, praying he wasn't too late. The father praised his daughters for their lightning-fast moves, and Willie stepped in just in time, stabilizing Anna and Zek's condition after that brutal magical strike. Willie was left reeling when his nephew acted like that, so he grabbed Gilbert and told him to isolate Gerda, because next time he might not just threaten her, he might kill her. Cradling little Zek in his arms, Willie froze. What kind of horrors could this kid possibly have survived in just a short life? And Shibal and Mariana were still shaking with pure fear, and Willie leaned in and told them, "Come with me, if you don't want to stay here." Anna chewed herself up with guilt for how useless she felt, blaming herself for not protecting the boy, until Willie stepped in and told her to breathe, calm down, and take a little rest. Anna didn't stop to think about herself. Her only worry was the young master's health, and that grit blew Willie away. He honestly thanked her with all his heart. Later, the entire family scrambled to figure out why Gert had done something so cruel. So yeah, he finally had to face the truth, that Zek was just a defenseless baby, guilty of absolutely nothing. But rage swallowed Gert whole. He didn't hear a single word, and Mariana was left wondering how a baby could possibly hurt them. Everyone shoved Gert to slow down and clear his head, because in that moment, he'd totally misread the situation. The young wizard shattered the magical chains and lunged back in, desperate to finish the job and kill his. Mariana's blood went cold, and she spun toward her father, begging him to shield Zek from Gert's raging fury. She swore she'd step in for her younger brother herself, even if it meant earning Gert's hatred. Willie's eyes went wide in shock, and he blurted out to his brother, "Why's he still locked up in silence? Hasn't stopped Gert yet." Gert watched as soon as Zek was born. The entire family instantly shifted all their focus onto him. And it felt like he'd been kicked out of his own home, even though he stood there. The worst part was how Zek looked so much like his mother that it made his irritation spark. He was convinced Zek stole his mother's love from him, and he swallowed the blame like it was all his fault. Rage swallowed him. His brother had turned into a monster in his mind, and he swore he'd never forgive Zek. While that storm raged inside, T and Mari sat in the next room, waiting for him. The girls bolted over and wrapped him in a tight hug, blurting out, over and over, how scared they'd been for his health. Uncle Willie was already worried sick about the boy's condition, and he decided to stay right by his side, even if it means getting slammed again by the brutal aura of hatred from his older brother. The convict wasn't just scared of Gert. Seeing him alone was enough to freeze him, because Gert looked like a bona fide madman, ready to tear him apart. Mari and T dropped to their knees in front of their little brother, apologizing for not being able to protect him, because they just didn't make it in time. But Zek, somehow, didn't hold a single grudge. Uncle Willie swore he'd never let Gerda near Zek again, and he'd personally watch him like a hawk. So, when the little one finally understood he'd been seconds from death, he knew his uncle's move was the only reason he was still alive. Unlike Gert, the sisters truly wanted to help Zek. No blame, no cold accusations about their mother's death. If anything, they felt it was their duty to carry his pain. Mari was utterly wiped out after helping heal her brother, so she collapsed into a nap, while Willie urged Taya to rest too. T craved one last stretch of time with her mom, trapped in the warm glow of memories, and she was sure Zek was innocent, so it felt right that Uncle Willie. Everyone piled into one room, and for a second it felt like Mom was still there, but Zek knew the truth. Right now, there was no other way. Uncle Willie genuinely treated the kids like family, and after everything that went down, they all finally crashed into rest. Zek only had one thing he couldn't stop regretting. Until he couldn't get a single word out. Once everyone finally fell asleep, Willie slipped to his brother and forced himself to tackle the problems he couldn't keep ignoring. He blurted out the first question about Gert's condition and got hit with the worst news. Gilbert reached for his son, but Zeke was still the one taking the blame, and somehow Gilbert got exactly why. He was completely lost. He had no idea what to do with all that rage. especially when he realized Gert wasn't just mad, he was trying to kill his little brother. Willie couldn't shake the feeling that the magical academy was hiding something way too suspicious, and Gilbert nodded, because right after the move, Gert had changed in ways you could instantly see. Willie even claimed the academy's hiding a secret, and that's exactly why parents aren't allowed to visit. Gilbert was desperate to jump into action, but his body gave out, his strength crumbled, and his vision started to fade, so Willie steadied him and talked him into resting for a bit. He swore he'd watch the children while Gilbert healed, but rage burned through him at how powerless he felt, and he couldn't wait to find out, right now, what happened to his son. When his brother finally surrendered and flopped onto the bed, Willie bolted outside. His mind was shredding him, and the death of Lyra was the wound under Gilbert's weakness. He trusted himself, and he made a vow. If the enemies are waiting to ruin their family, they're going to get shut down. What matters most is to outlast it all. After everything, Zek, trapped in an adult mind, finally understood how brutal life was for his family, so he decided to level up fast, get smarter, and grow stronger, and that's when he started devouring magical books. He never stopped thinking about his kind, wonderful mother, and that memory burned in his chest, driving every step of his growth. As Zek tore through harder and harder spells, Zek couldn't help but grin at every win. Day by day, he was getting closer to his. 4 years roared by, kids grew up fast, and Zek was already moving and talking like he'd never been gone. Meanwhile, Thea was packing up for the journey, and he leaned in and asked. To wait, the sister stared at him, stunned like she had no clue what he was after, and then he just blurted it. He wanted her to take him with her. The convict realized T was headed for the Adventurers Guild training, and he couldn't stop himself from wanting to see it all with his own eyes. With the evaluative eye, his knowledge unlocked at once. Now he could see every trait of his sister, and right then she just stepped into her life as a full-fledged adventurer. But T wouldn't budge. He's still too small for dangerous missions, and he's not going with him. The convict flat-out refused. Then, showing off real magic, he swore he could fight on his own. T froze in disbelief. How could a kid possibly have that kind of power? The inmate laid it all out, years of training, hours buried in books, but then he admitted the brutal truth. He couldn't level up by himself. The assistant kept hammering the truth. Zek burns through energy for nothing. He just can't fully convert it. After all, he's still in the middle of his rise, because if you want to grow, you don't just read books, you have to fight monsters and win. That's why Zek went looking for fights, because if he didn't, he'd never reach the future his mother had always dreamed of telling him about. T said fighting training is the only way to grow, but she still felt Zek was way too young, and she couldn't wrap her head around why everyone was rushing. The boy snapped that if he stays weak, he'll never be able to protect anyone, and that fear is exactly why he's determined to get stronger. T snapped back to that moment when she begged Gert to take her with him, then vowed she'd never make that mistake again. She ordered the steward to get the carriage ready, announced her brother was coming too, and watched Zek light up. He thanked her, but T warned him this would be the first time, and maybe the only time. T snapped that her brother couldn't even step away, one moment gone, and it might cost him his life. Yet Zek was so desperate to level up for training that he'd do anything to get there. On the trip, T leaned in and laid it out. This training's for hunting the white rabbits, but she shot Zek a warning. The forest is packed with other deadly monsters, so he'd better stay behind. Even though today was supposed to be nothing but hands-on practice, and no serious monsters were ever meant to show up, the sister practically shoved Zek forward, begging him to pull out every stop for success. Zek was thrilled to have T by his side, because Mari had always been too overbearing, hovering non-stop over him, especially after that childhood injury. Zek treasured Mari's love and never let her overprotectiveness sting him, because from the very first days of his life, that family warmth wrapped around him like a blanket. When they reached the forest, they jumped out of the carriage and started getting everything ready, and Thea begged Zek again to stay back, because she couldn't let Mari find out. She ordered Genso to fetch them in the evening, then swore she'd tell her father herself, so nothing would spark unnecessary worry. Once the carriage pulled away, T rushed to meet her friend Nicola and introduced him to her younger brother. The convict practically beamed to finally stand beside his sister, and when he clutched her hand tight, it caught her off guard in the best way. T met his gaze and swore she'd protect him today, and together they stormed into a gorgeous spot where a fountain splashed in the center. Soon they were standing in the white forest. Zeka couldn't take his eyes off the spellbinding beauty, and T leaned in to tell him the truth. The magic in this place is so thick that everything grows white. In this tangled forest, monsters lurk everywhere, so yeah, it's basically a training ground for beginners, and Thea wouldn't stop yelling, "Stay locked in, don't wander off, and keep close." They ran into the same Nicola again, a big, burly adventurer who was pumped to train with the new company, and Zek couldn't believe how he looked. Nicola never imagined he'd run into such a tiny adventurer, and Zek politely introduced himself as Theo's younger brother. His manners wowed the warrior. Nicola swore he'd help and show her everything, and when T saw it, she urged him to be extra careful with her brother, while Zek snapped on the evaluative eye. Nicola hit level 17 with a rank D, wielding water and light, while his strongest stat was pure attack. He was just a year older than Thea, yet he fought like a prodigy. His sword skills were perfectly dialed in, so even as a rank D adventurer, he looked almost unfair. Zek's sudden presence threw the plan off a little, and T quickly apologized for not warning her friend ahead of time. She explained that her brother is seriously itching to train. The inmate himself jumped in, grabbed Nicola's attention, and demanded his help today, because he needed to level up fast and learn brand new skills, no excuses. Nicola got hooked on the boy's grit and pressed him about his skills, but Thea snapped that Zek was still a kid. Then Nicola grinned anyway, praised his cheerful spirit, and promised to help. He hoisted Zek onto his shoulders and told him they were hitting the road right now to hunt monsters. T was freaking out, but Nicola waved it off and said not to stress over the little warrior. The company pushed deeper into the white forest and halted in a dead quiet spot. Zek demanded, "Why are we stopping? Are we walking into a trap?" T just smirked, like she knew exactly what was coming. Nicola told him that T once stepped in and covered the costs for his sick sister's treatment, because Nicola couldn't swing it on his own. He called it a rough patch, but T reminded him she'd only signed up for fencing lessons. While Nicola rolled her eyes, she thought T was way too humble for her own good. The convict had no clue what was coming, but he still stepped in to help the good adventurer too, then swore he'd hand over every last coin he earned from this. Nicola thanked him with real gratitude, but he made it clear, right now, the kid's focus is leveling up fast and getting real combat experience. The coach told Zek to get ready for the fight, but Zek shot back, "Hold up, I need a little more time," because he wanted to drill first with the evaluative eye end. He had to learn how to fight, and his first opponent was the White Rabbit, fired up with fire and darkness, able to forget everything and snap in sudden flashes. With the eye's power, Zek absorbed every detail he needed. Nicola offered help and tried to draw the rabbit's attention, but Zek refused to close in. He fired from far away, and he was fully ready. The beam slammed into the target dead-on, and Nicola's grin split wide. He could barely believe a kid could hit like that from so far. Thea leaned in and said, "That's what years of training do." Right after his first win, Zek was buzzing with joy. His fiery attack even caught seasoned Nicola off guard, and Nicola admitted that a one-of-a-kind talent was finally blooming in the T family. But even that lone rabbit wasn't cutting it. The level refused to budge. The convict was itching to wipe out a few more monsters, and Nicola jumped in to help. With the spell Windstorm blasting in her wake, Thea crept through the air, scoped out the northwest, and found a whole bunch of white rabbits huddled nearby, plus some strange, unknown creatures roaming close by. Nicola hauled Zek up again and they tore toward the finish, but T snapped at him to slow down and watch out for her brother. Too late, because Zek had already smashed through even more monsters. Finally, he hit level 2. Nicola was certain Zek would feel like a whole new beast now, and the kid was so thrilled he even forgot to check his. Later, he finally checked the details. Magic had jumped by 50 points, while defense and luck shot up by 20 each, and Zek could feel it. He was about to start matching them. Nikolai couldn't help but grin. Zek had just wiped out 7 rabbits in one shot. "From now on," he urged, "we train together. That'll work way better." Nicola even joked that T probably wasn't weaker than her brother, but T just laughed and snapped back. "Let him meet our father first, then he'll finally learn what real strength looks like." Nicola couldn't stop staring at how insanely talented the Thea family was, but Zek snapped him out of it. He refused to give away too much. He was desperate to hit level 3, but he chose to save it for later. Then he turned to Nikolai and thanked him, because that help taught him more than he could have imagined. Just like that, their talk got smashed. Angry goblins burst out of the bushes, and Nicola snapped, ordering an instant retreat. But then, plot twist, those goblins didn't attack at all. They bolted right past like they were running from something far worse, and everybody just stood there, stunned. In a blink, the wood snapped like a gunshot, and Nicola barked to shift positions. The massive tree crashed down, splitting everyone in two. T was left on one side, while Nicola and Zek got stranded on the other. The goblins showed up again, and the adventurers snapped into battle mode, until Thea saw it. A trap, and the goblins had split them up on purpose. For all their chaos, they moved like geniuses. Thea tried to play it smart, but then reality slammed her. The worst thing possible was right in front of her. So yeah, he was the real king of the goblins, and the moment it hit, that girl screamed at Nikali, "Grab Zek and run. If you don't, we're all dead." A gigantic monster loomed, like a goblin king in full glory, towering over the terrified T. She couldn't wrap her head around how that thing had slipped through the quiet forest and somehow ended up in the white. The king was supposed to be armored, yet somehow he stood there bare-skinned, like the fight from before stole it clean out of his grasp. T figured the monster had shattered the protective barrier and burst out of the silent forest, and now it was standing there, right in front of her. Meanwhile, Nicola and Zek were suddenly boxed in by a swarm of furious goblins. The Goblin King charged, and Thea barely slipped out of the way, but the second she did, dread hit her hard. This monster couldn't be beaten. So she shot forward to throw the enemy off, buying her friends the seconds they needed to slip away. No other choice, she remembered her vow, promising she'd protect the younger one. Brother, and just like that, Nicola got trapped in a nightmare. Monsters flooded the area, and there wasn't a single place to fall back to. Right then, Zek blew past every expectation. He slammed into several enemies at once with a furious wave of attacks. Nicola froze in shock. He never expected the tiny mage to unleash power like that. But the spell guzzled way too much energy. The prisoner realized his magic reserves were still razor-thin, and his body just couldn't adjust to the spike in power. Because his body was too weak, he could pass out any time, so even while he stayed awake, he still couldn't keep it up. The convict refused to quit. He clawed together every last spark of magic and struck again, going all in to wipe out every monster in one brutal blast. Right then, Thea hunted the Goblin King's weak spot, dodging every hit, until she suddenly felt something. A sudden, brutal hit landed, and she jolted back with a sharp flinch, scrambling to the side. Even the seasoned T had zero time to react. This monster blindsided her completely, and she never saw it coming. Zek heard his sisters scream and launched toward her, but Nicola yanked him back and took the magical explosion straight on, shielding him with his own body. The adventurer felt the truth hit like a punch. This situation was critical, and it was getting worse by the second. His strength was nearly gone, and right then, the Goblin King closed in fast. With the evaluative eye guiding him, he pinpointed the monster's weak spot, the middle of its forehead, right beneath the helmet, where every ounce of power had to be shoved. The convict clenched his jaw, went all in, and swore this monster would regret every single thing. The real mission is to save wounded Thea, because in this brutal fight, she's already burning through every last ounce of strength. She remembered the time she couldn't stop Gert and couldn't protect Zek, and that sting still aches in her heart. T snapped at herself with fierce rage for every weak, indecisive step. Then her anger flipped into pure drive, and she couldn't wait to rewrite everything. That's why she finally understood what drove her brother to get stronger, and now she refused to quit, not even for a second. She straight up refused to call it quits. She swore she'd keep fighting until her final breath. A few heartbeats later, a giant monster got yanked to a halt just a few meters in front of Zek. Magic slammed it right there. Thea finally locked in the spell, and with all her strength, she held the Goblin King at bay, keeping him from ever reaching her brother. They even threw up a light barrier, but the monster shattered it in seconds. T burst into action with instant magical acceleration. She lunged at the enemy and slammed him with her whirlwind spell, one brutal blast that hit like a storm. Nicola stared in shock. He never thought T could wreck things this badly. But the monster wouldn't budge, so Zek turned to Nicola and demanded he sling the force straight at the goblin's head, because Zek wanted that hit to land right on the weak spot. That shock hit the adventurer hard, but the boy's stubborn determination sparked real confidence. In a heartbeat, Nicola hurled Zek straight into the goblin's face. He stepped in, and the boy blasted a magical strike with everything he had, driving it straight for the helmet. A blazing beam of light slammed into the monster, and it shrieked through unbearable. Pure agony, Zek's blazing spear slammed in with deadly precision, striking exactly in. Exposed his weak spot, then the monster crumpled, blasting dust everywhere like a smoke bomb. Everyone went still in an instant. Nobody could believe it, because the fight was already over. And as Zek's last strength crumpled away, he still felt pure joy, victory in his bones. The boy lost control of his own body. He crumpled into unconsciousness, and Nicola didn't manage to catch him. Right at the last second, Thea sprinted in and snatched Zek. She caught him before he could hit the ground. She eased the impact and shot him a worried look, asking right away if he was okay. The convict told his sister he was okay and begged her not to worry. Then Thea apologized to him for dragging him into more pain all because of her. But Zek was grinning through the pain, because that injury didn't matter when the result was this worth it, and he made sure to thank his sister for her guts, for guarding him when it counted. T clung to her brother like her life depended on it, whispering that this time, Finally, they could protect each other, and Nicola rushed in to heal them, but his strength just wasn't enough. Zek thanked him anyway, even as a heavy sadness hit, because he couldn't end the monster himself. The adventurer couldn't stop thinking, who the heck was Zek, and how did he zero in on the Goblin King's weak spot so fast? T shot back, dead serious. We can't share that, security would get wrecked. Nicola's heart sank, but T snapped into action and told her, no matter what, she had to protect her little brother with everything she had. The seasoned warrior didn't even argue. He nodded and admitted it was the right call. The inmate shot back, asking how Nicola was holding up, and Nicola waved off his injuries as pathetic scratches, saying it was time to talk about something that mattered more. After all, he'd just witnessed with his own eyes a child crushing the Goblin King, and his confidence took a brutal hit. Nicola swore he wouldn't tell a soul about the fight, and Thea thanked him with real sincerity. The adventurers pressed Zek for his secret, and the boy smirked, calling it his fire spear. Nicola stared in awe at the spell's raw power. It had gone and obliterated a real monster right in front of them. The convict grinned because he'd managed to hook the seasoned warrior. His heartfelt words hit Nicola hard. Smiled anyway, but victory didn't erase what Zek knew deep down. He wasn't done, he was staring at something monstrous, and the fear of dying again, of failing once more, crushed him. The assistant told him to drop the past, because Zek's living in a whole new world now, but yeah, that's just the start of it. It lit the boy up with pure fury. Then the assistant swooped in, praising him for leveling up and smashing a high-rank monster, like that wasn't a massive leap forward. That inmate is different. He made it out when everyone else would have crashed, and now he's got real confidence. God really did pick Zek for something special. He blessed the chosen ones, and Zek was the proof, handing him the one chance to finally grow strong. Earlier, Zek had heard Uncle Willie say stuff like that too, but he brushed it off and figured he was just a walking curse, someone who brought pain to everyone around him. But now he's got a real shot, become stronger, and fight to protect everyone he loves. The convict chose pure, unimaginable power at any price, so nobody would ever have to suffer again. Days before the clash with the Goblin King, a band of adventurers hauled precious cargo through the silent forest, knowing danger was lurking in every shadow. Brutal sudden impact slammed the carriage off balance, and everyone inside screamed in pure panic. In pure shock, they watched the Goblin King himself crawl out of the thicket, and panic hit so hard they spun around and bolted. They didn't even try to save the cargo. One look at the chaos and they ditched everything, scrambling to escape in full panic. That valuable cargo wasn't just treasure at all. It turned out to be a baby sacred tiger, and now it was finally free. A few months later, Zek went hunting again, this time with his whole family, and wiped out the white rabbits with total confidence. He slowly turned the difficulty up and relished every second of the hunt, showing off his magic the whole way. Mari, like always, couldn't help but beam at her little brother and wrap him in a tight hug every single chance she got. Mary was absolutely buzzing with pride over Zek's wins, and she prayed with all her heart that he would rise to become the strongest hero in all of this world. She bent down to her little brother, whispering that he was the sweetest thing in the world, and swearing she'd never, ever let him go. Filbert clocked how much Zek looked like him, and Uncle Willie nodded hard. This kid wasn't just talented, he was packed with serious magic. Zek's father and uncle declared that ordinary magic was plenty for him, while Zek fought tooth and nail to slip out of his sister's nonstop, squeezing embrace. The whole family stared in awe at the young wizard's rapid rise, and Zek honestly poured his gratitude into his father with a sincere thank you for backing him every step. Maria, as always, wore pride like armor. There was no way she'd back down and let T take over caring for Zek. Every detail of how they crushed the Goblin King stayed locked up tight, all to keep the boy safe. Gilbert told everyone the search into the monster's remains is still in motion and ordered Alberto to watch Zeke like a hawk. The boy practically burst with relief. His father's smart move kept the monster secret, so nobody would ever find out. Maria couldn't stop herself. She kept clinging to her brother, hugging him tight even as he resisted, and begged him to quit hiding and be brave. But just then Zek spotted something moving in the bushes, and his hunger snapped right back to life, igniting the thrill of hunting again. He leapt straight onto the ground to hunt down where the noise was coming from, but Mari snapped that she wouldn't let him. Only her father's quick intervention stopped her from running after him. Gilbert brushed off the threat in the white forest and waved Zek on, letting him take a little stroll without a care. But no matter what he said, Mari's anxiety kept clawing at her, and she just couldn't settle. She didn't waste a second. She sprinted to find her brother because a terrifying feeling told her something was seriously wrong. Gilbert and Willie didn't even flinch at this mess. Ever since Gert swore she'd kill Zek, Marie's been hovering around nonstop. Willie leaned in and asked how T was doing, and she didn't spill the whole story, just said she was feeling better. She said with full confidence that Zek is living it the right way, and that those little injuries aren't a setback, they're how you learn what the world really is. Willie nodded and said they should keep a close eye on the kid, but never lock him up like some prisoner in a cell. For now, you're not getting past that barrier, because if he slips through, we'd have to scour the entire forest. Meanwhile, Zek hunted the monster all by himself, until he finally spotted it, and everything he'd been chasing clicked into place. Right in front of him lay a wounded sacred tiger cub, too rare to use its icy lightning. The convict's jaw dropped when he laid eyes on the sacred beast, and he talked to it using a magic tongue that translated every word. He couldn't wrap his head around it. How could something that rare be left alone out there in the forest? Those wounds spell it out. He tangled with the Goblin King and slipped out by the skin of his teeth. Now he's got one thing left to do: get help. The convict inched forward, swearing he meant no harm, but the tiger cub still snapped and sank its bite into his arm. Even with pain screaming through him, the boy refused to quit. He fired off healing magic, and those brutal wounds started closing at once. After a few tense minutes, the tiger cub finally settled down and stopped snarling with aggression. The convict swore to the beast that everything would finally be okay, right now, and the beast answered by licking the boy's hand like it was thanking him. The young mage stared in shock at how soft the creature's fur felt. This wasn't a monster yet, just a tiny cub, and all it wanted was. The convict clocked it instantly. The tiger cub was terrified out of its mind, like something awful had already happened, and it was teetering on the edge of death. The little one shook with memories of that nightmare captivity. Those hunters shoved him in a cage like he was just merchandise. When Zek spotted tears brimming in the beast's eyes, he swept in with open arms, hugged it tight, and soothed its shaking heart, so relieved he could finally protect a helpless creature. The tiger cub looked the boy in the eye, called him a good person, and swore it would always be by his side. Right at first, Zek couldn't even make sense of what happened. Then the magical assistant stepped in and revealed the truth. A contract had just been sealed. The boy looked utterly lost and demanded an explanation. Why on earth was the little tiger cub clinging to him like he was its whole world? The assistant declared it a blood contract, sealed with a sacred tiger. Thanks to that blood exchange, Zek forced the monster to bind to him for real, even though he still couldn't wrap his head around it. Like all of this happened just from a single drop of blood. Right then, Marie stormed up to her brother and caught a weird, unsettling detail she couldn't ignore. Fear slammed into her when she saw a real monster dangling in his hands. When the kids finally came home, Gilbert swore they dragged a black cat straight out of the forest. The convict insisted the tiger cub was white. He'd found it in the white forest, so he hauled it with him. The father snapped in surprise, but figured the beast had fled its usual spot because the magical barrier got shattered. The convict bit his tongue and didn't mention it was a sacred tiger, because if his father found out, there's no way he'd ever let him keep it. And now he had to rack his brain for a plan that would convince his dad to finally let him keep the beast. Zek couldn't think of a better move, so he just straight up asked for permission to bring the tiger cub home and keep it as a pet. Mari wanted nothing to do with it. She thought that monster was way too dangerous, but Zek swore he'd make a real connection with it and even reminded her of the wound he'd taken. She feared the bite might infect her, but the boy grinned and called the tiger cub a perfectly obedient little angel. She dug in her heels and refused, but Zek begged her to leave him, so her father finally started thinking. Gilbert finally leaned in and asked if the boy understood that whoever tames someone holds the duty. Zek nodded and promised, "Don't worry, the responsibility is on me." Then the father relented and let the monster stay, grabbing Mari to help carry her brother's wish. The convict burst with joy, thanked them with all his heart, and even the tiger cub looked like it was smiling too. Gilbert rushed to ask how the beast was doing, then lit up with praise as he credited his son for healing him with magic. Maria shot down the idea of a monster living in their house, but when her father spoke, she couldn't argue back. She vowed to watch her brother with her life on the line, because his safety meant everything. Once that tiger cub finally settled into the house, Mari kept a sharp watch on him nonstop, even though he never once showed a hint of aggression. But that caring sister saw right through it. Call it cute all you want. To her, even a friendly monster was pure danger and nothing but a deception. Constant surveillance drained Zek's strength, so he fused his magic with the tiger cub's magic. Sneaking out from under his sister's watch, the boy leaned in and told the monster, "Start training." The tiger cub didn't get it at first because why would it listen? The inmate leaned in and admitted, "I just clawed my magic back, and now I'm going to train like my life depends on it." He had to get stronger, fast, because every person he loved needed him to be their shield. That little tiger froze in shock. He'd never seen anyone gentle, only cruel people. Standing beside Zek, he finally felt it. His owner was the real exception. The tiger cub, bursting with worry, latched onto the boy and pleaded with him to smile more often. The inmate swore he'd carry out the request, while the older sister kept her eyes locked on every move. For Mari, her brother was still just a kid, sprinting around with a monster like it was nothing more than a toy. She replayed Gert's attack in her mind, and she couldn't shake the fear that if she left Zek alone even for too long, something terrible would happen. But she chose to focus only on the good, because she knew thoughts can shape everything, and she kept a sharp eye on her brother. That tiger cub was sweet to everyone, and the second he spotted Mari, he just had to play, until Zek snapped, "Back you go." Late that night, the boy felt drained from the day, but his heart was still full. He could barely wait to crawl into bed and sleep. Usually she'd slip in before bedtime, but tonight she shattered the routine and showed up anyway. Zek figured Mari wouldn't bother him, so he started practicing magic, until Mari suddenly burst into the room and barked, "Sleep right now." The boy blinked in shock at her late visit. She'd always been asleep for ages, so this was wildly out of character. His sister kept snapping about insomnia, begging to stay close every night, and it totally caught him off guard. She asked if she could lie down beside him, and Zek was so thrown off that he didn't even know what to do with himself. Maria threw her arms around her brother, yanked sleep over her eyes in seconds, and Zek couldn't stop staring, because somehow she didn't even want to leave him alone at home anymore. He remembered the day he rescued an injured tiger cub and carried it home, terrified it might hurt someone, but it never did, not once. Now the baby was sound asleep beside him, and Zek finally realized that training solo was about to get way harder. But he refused to quit. He still craved that next level, because becoming a true monster hunter was the only road to real power. His power and skill were still way too weak, so he quietly slipped into training, because he didn't want to wake a single soul. Breaking free from his sister's arms, he slammed on the acceleration, and at last, the freedom he'd been craving was finally within reach. This was the first time the new ability actually worked, and the moment it clicked, thrill flooded him. The white forest turned into his training battlefield, and now he had to keep pushing his skills even further. But before he could even move, the tiger cub snapped a warning. If his sister woke up and didn't find him, her rage would explode. The convict swore everything would be fine and shoved the little tiger into place, ordering it to stay put and keep Mari under watch. Then he fired up the magical acceleration again and burst out of the room. But the tiger cub, clinging to Mari's side, refused to sleep and wouldn't stay put for a second. Without wasting a second, the tiny animal snapped to attention and trailed right after its master. Meanwhile, Zek was already deep in the white forest, running on fumes after hammering acceleration magic again and again. But time was running out, and the boy went all in, using every single second to level up. He knew this: go higher and you unlock more magical energy, and now he had to rip open the mystery of exactly where his powers finally hit the wall. This time, Zek slammed down his ice blockade spell, and the results hit him like a lightning strike the moment it formed. It was a total breakthrough. His magic actually worked. With that wind lighting a fire in his chest, the boy decided to keep training. He busted out the Demon Thunder spell, and right when he expected lightning, it went sideways, because the magic didn't just fire, it summoned. A horrifying picture, looking just like Gert's older brother, flashed before his eyes, and panic ripped through the convict. The monster looked like a straight-up demon, and even with no idea what was going on, it still snapped forward and dared to attack. The dark creature snapped back with a savage counterattack, and the boy's fear hit like a truck as he begged it to stop. But that second strike gave him the opening he needed. He shattered the ghost that looked exactly like his brother and sent it scattering. Even when the darkness finally vanished, Zek couldn't breathe. True horror swallowed him whole. His hands started to shake, his strength slipped away, and he crumpled to the ground, staring in disbelief as he realized this magic was way too dangerous. The assistant broke it down. He's totally wiped out, the magic energy is gone, and the boy just drops into unconsciousness. Zek jolted awake and froze in shock, because he hadn't even made it back to his room before his sister woke up. He tore himself apart for his own weakness and came to the harsh truth. It was still way too early to unleash magic that powerful. He remembered that once, right beside his mother, something powerful had awakened in him. Then his brother burst in, pointed at him, and started accusing him on the spot. The convict froze in terror, feeling utterly helpless as a white rabbit crept closer to him. Meanwhile, everyone in the estate already heard the boy vanished, and they tore off in a full-blown search, sprinting through the streets to find him. Anna made a quick call to double-check the right wing, while Theo whipped out wind magic to scan the area. Theo figured it was time to widen the search. There's no way Zek could have hauled that tiger cub too far. Maria was totally baffled. Why did her brother vanish without a single word? Did some tiger cub snatch him away? Right then, the servants burst in yelling that they'd just seen a magical tiger bolt out of the estate like it owned the place. He burst out the master's room window and sprinted like his life depended on it straight into the white forest. At first, the maid swore she was imagining it. Everyone was supposed to be asleep, and she didn't dare tell a soul. But Mari snapped into action and tore off right away. She had to find her brother, no delays. She sprinted so hard she didn't even hear a word of the comments, all while her worry for Zek clawed at her, yet she was certain he wasn't alone. A few hundred meters from the lake, she caught sight of a familiar figure ahead. A tiger cub was hauling unconscious Zek on its back, sprinting like it had no time to waste. Mary felt pure fear and wild awe. How could that tiny creature possibly carry her brother? As she inched closer, she caught his soft breaths, and her heart leapt. He wasn't dead, he was just knocked out. Without a second thought, the girl slammed healing magic into place, desperate to save her brother. Just minutes later, Zek jolted his eyes open, and a cozy warmth flooded him like sunlight. Maria burst into tears of pure joy, and the boy just stood there, totally baffled, trying to piece together what in the world had happened. The convict swallowed his pride and apologized for his stupidity, while Mari clung to her brother and broke down, confessing through tears just how terrified she'd been. At that exact moment, the father rushed in, grabbed his son's attention, and thoroughly checked him over, making sure he was truly okay. Gilbert let out a breath of relief. His son was alive after that White Forest night raid, though the whole thing was still a reckless mess. Maria couldn't wrap her head around why her brother would show up there alone at night, and Zek shot back that it was his own choice to make. She peppered him with questions, but he shut down hard, because if he spilled the truth about his higher magic, he'd terrify the people he loves. The boy opened his mouth, but no words came out, while his father sat in silence, staring at the problem like it was burning a hole through his thoughts. In the end, Gilbert snapped and slapped his son with 2 weeks of house arrest. He even named a guardian for his son, so now Zek is going to be watched like a hawk. Gilbert leaned in and said, "Your son is special, big dreams ride on him, and I bet he has a damn good reason to slip out at night. Even if secrets are getting buried, don't panic, your family's got your back no matter what." Her father reminded Zek that every family member brings strength to the table, so he didn't have to wrestle his anxieties alone. Those words hit Zek like lightning. He finally understood that a family can carry you, and that he didn't have to face everything by himself anymore. The boy said he wanted to train in magic, without waking anyone up with his wishes. He confessed that he's chasing strength so he can finally protect himself, and that he's still haunted by what he's already done. His father dropped a brutal reminder of his mother's tragic past, like, "Don't you dare forget danger is real." But Mari begged them to stay silent about the pain, and swore her brother it would never happen to her. Gilbert pulled his daughter into a tight hug and swore to his kids that nothing, and no one, would ever snatch them away again, because he was going to protect them with his life. Lying in bed, Zek replayed his father's words in his head, burning with shame over the tears everyone had seen. But those heartfelt words hit him like a weight lifting off his chest, and boom, a fresh fire ignited inside him. He had to get stronger, even with powerful people already standing nearby. The boy finally snapped. He decided he wouldn't hide everything alone anymore, and he poured his fears and doubts out to the people he loved. And man, he was grateful to that tiger cub that snatched him out of the forest, because without it, things would have gone way worse in seconds. The tiger smirked and slid in a sly little question, "So you're really grateful, then scratch my belly." The convict couldn't refuse. He dove into playing with his new buddy, and then it hit him out of nowhere. He still hadn't given him a name. Naming a holy tiger isn't a walk in the park, so the boy told him straight, he's hunting for a name the tiger will actually love. After weighing every option, he finally called it Hacky, and that tiger cub lit up, curled into his arms, and purred like it had found home. The convict swore Hacky was his true friend, and the tiger practically purred with joy, thrilled to call such a kind master its own. While Gilbert sat in the office, he talked to his late wife in his head, pouring out everything, especially their son. Staring at Lyra's photo, the family's head finally admitted it. Zek is growing into a once-in-a-generation prodigy, unlike anything the world has ever seen. Right when the memories started slipping away, Alberto and Willie slammed on the office door, because the older son had explosive news about the White Forge. He first thanked everyone for the support, then dove straight into the magical ash they'd uncovered just a few months back. After the investigators dug it all up, they found the ashes were from goblins, so the barrier cracked, and the monsters rushed into the White Forest. Uncle Willie froze. Who the heck wrecked that B-rank monster? Everyone had a guess, and they all pointed the same way. After a quick pause, Gilbert finally picked the only name that made sense, his youngest son, Zek. He remembered Theo's report from the forest, showing every brutal wound that had hit them all. Willie couldn't wrap his head around it, how a magical adventurer this strong could have been hurt in a place that was supposed to be safe. Alberto figured Theo must be covering for Zek, and even Willie couldn't help but buy it, but the father still couldn't wrap his head around how his son had actually beaten that monster. If it all happened the way it really happened, you can't shrug it off, because this single moment could have shaken the entire world. Alberto remembered how some of those ashes drifted all the way into the city center, and that's when rumors about the mysterious hero exploded everywhere. To protect the secret, he pushed a story that it was Nicola, the captain of the first squad, who did it all. Willie threw praise at Nicola, and it was well earned, because it was Nicola who stepped in and helped hide everything. His uncle swept up every last ash, ready to use it as the secret ingredient to forge a brand new magical stone. Gilbert thanked his brother for the support and begged him to keep an eye on Zeke. Alberto didn't hesitate, promising he'd take care of him. Willie couldn't stop thinking about how different Zek was from his brother Gert. Everyone had seen that rough, hard-to-handle side of him since he was a kid. Zek has to keep his powers under wraps or he won't just be noticed, he'll be in danger. Gilbert only wanted one thing for his son, to live free and unchained, with no greedy officials or self-seekers calling the shots. Staring at a photo of his wife, he swore to make their dream come true. Zek would finally get the peaceful life he'd been chasing. Fuming with regret, the father demanded the whole story and grilled for every detail about monster hunting, trying to fix the mistakes he'd made. At first, Alberto swore it was just Theo and Zek to blame, but then the truth hit him. Everyone, in one way or another, had their hands in it. Gilbert already knew Zek wasn't a kid anymore. He went to the White Forest all by himself, and that move screamed maturity. Willie figured he could buy time with the teleportation stone, but the price was brutal, so he stayed locked on Zek, duty first, no exceptions. Alberto remembered he was dying to see Zek in the fight, but last time, he showed up late. Gilbert didn't get what they were talking about at first, until it hit him, the magical stone that recorded everything. He secretly recorded Zek, and Alberto was dying to watch that video. Minutes later, the whole crowd leaned in on the video of Zek tending to an injured tiger cub, and Alberto couldn't hide his pride in his brother one bit. Everyone huddled around the recording, and Willie wouldn't let a single person step in, so the whole night played out like that. The very next day, the relatives decided to take matters into their own hands and teach Zek magic themselves. Willie even pushed for a live demonstration of what he could do. Uncle still remembered how he taught every older kid, except Gert, and then he made the promise, clear as day, Zek would get it easy. But the boy was grinning. He never once imagined a teacher like that would change his life. Willie beamed at the boy's eagerness and barked, "Don't get comfortable, magic doesn't reward the lazy." And Zek already clocked his uncle's character in one sharp look. Now he was fully ready to dive into training. That night, Zek hunched over the numbers and studied his teacher's limits. Uncle Willie was level 60, powered by 3 higher elements, and hiding a wild, mysterious wind spirit. The boy's eyes lit up with raw curiosity, because Willie had skill in every hand and could take on any weapon like it was nothing. The prisoner was stunned, because any enemy who saw that bold, unstoppable mage would shake with fear. Even though he was still nowhere near high magic, the young wizard swore to himself he'd pour every ounce of effort into it. The strangest part was the spirit of the wind. Zek had never laid eyes on anything like it before. Meanwhile, Willie was sizing up his student too, and Zeke's potential was absolutely unreal. Even without teleportation, the boy's magic power blew past expectations, and Willie could already feel that diving into spells was about to get seriously exciting. Out of nowhere, Hacky showed up, proudly hauling a branch ripped from the highest peak, just begging for everyone to praise him. Willie spotted the beast from the video and fixated on the tiger cub right away, while Zek grinned, leaned in, and patted his friend's shoulder. This little boy introduced himself as Hacky and fired back by calling Willie Redhead, and the uncle instantly leaned in, way more curious than before. Willie caught sight of that snow-white fur for the first time, and in khaki, he suddenly recognized Isla's power, ice and lightning. He praised the tiger cub's wild, one-of-a-kind way of acting on the spot, and right then, Hacky decided it for sure. This kid was the real deal. The prisoner felt pure relief for slipping past with Hacky's real power, but Willie still clocked the weird, twisting magic coursing through the beast's body. The uncle demanded permission to test Haki, the tiger cub nodded, and Zek instantly started panicking. Willie stumbled on clues to a deadly powerful spell, and warned that if nobody steps in right now, the magic's flow could grind to a halt. He was convinced Mari had cured Haki, but his uncle shut him down, just saying it wasn't enough. Turns out that beast is trapped under a brutal curse that doesn't break, even after they try to treat it. The convict narrowed his eyes like a judge, and then horror hit him hard because he realized he'd completely missed the curse. The boy shot Haki an apology, but Willie clapped him on the shoulder and told him, "This kind of tangled spell is hard to spot, even for a grown mage." Willie suddenly felt a weird, unsettling aura hanging over him, like a curse with no known origin had latched on. He demanded a bit of Haki fur to hunt the sorcerer, and right there in the White Forest, a magical trail was already waiting to be followed. Because of that curse, Haki couldn't use magic at all. Zek snapped right away, asking how he could help. Willie told him, "You can knock it out with a cleansing spell, though I'm not exactly strong in that kind of magic." The convict finally understood the brutal truth. He didn't know enough, and true learning would take years, and he had zero time left. Then it hit him, his father's words rang in his head, "Don't fear asking your family for help." The boy took a deep breath and chose to trust his uncle, spilling the info that might actually help. Maria couldn't shake the worry about the tiger cub, and she decided she had to step in and help. Willie remembered the girl had just learned purification magic. Maybe she could burn away the curse. But Mari hesitated. Her magical supply was running thin, so Willie leaned in and promised her this. If she can even pull off something like this at her age, that alone is pure rarity. Even with doubts eating at her, the girl stepped up, volunteered, and threw herself into the mission to save her beloved pet. Turns out Mari had been clutching a cleansing magic stone her mother gave her right before she died. She admitted she'd only ever had light at first, but with relentless effort, she finally mastered the purification magic, and it was already too late. When the first winds finally showed up, Mom's condition snapped for the worse, and even the mightiest magic couldn't keep her going. Right after Zek was born, the mother suddenly seemed to wake up, like life surged back into her, and that special power got locked inside the stone, while Mari kept it safe, waiting for the perfect moment. And now it's here, time to save Kaki, ripping him out of that brutal curse before it ruins him forever. But the moment Zek held out the stone, the tiger cub snapped the offer down. He wouldn't let something that precious get handed over just to save his life. Mari's eyes widened, and Zek leaned in to explain, "Haki is too valuable to waste just on himself." The girl with tears in her eyes looked the beast straight in the face and swore she'd wanted to apologize for every doubt and fear she'd ever let slip. She admitted straight from the heart that Haki finally felt like family to them, and now she's determined to help him break this curse for good. The tiger cub finally caved in and agreed to help, and right after that, Mari slammed the stone to life. A cleansing beam of light erupted and wrapped around Haki, while magic poured out of the stone like a soothing, endless spring. That tiny kitten purred like music, and it felt like some invisible weight finally slid off his shoulders. Willie confirmed it, magic was flowing again, and Zek poured out his gratitude to his sister with all the heart he had. His uncle dared him to try Haki, then conjure a tiny snowfall just to see what he could do. With just a few swipes of that paw, soft white snow erupted and drifted down over everyone. Everyone was buzzing with joy, like they'd stepped straight into a winter fairy tale. Haki whooped as snow swirled around him, and Zek grinned and pitched the idea of a giant snowman. The tiger cub had no clue what it was, so the boy started showing it how to shape the snow, until Mari stepped in and warned him not to touch it with bare hands. Everyone was roaring with laughter, and Willie stood there soaking it all in, his heart swelling at every kid's smile. Seeing Haki finally getting better, the uncle snapped into action and postponed the lesson till tomorrow. Meanwhile, a girl watched them in silence, dying to play with Zek and slide right into that cozy little crew. A prisoner from Haki cooked up a wild game. He blasted magic at the snow, praying it wouldn't melt as they tried to keep it frozen. They both mastered the force with deadly precision, and the magical snow stayed icy cold. The game was a total win. The cheerful convict clutched his fluffy buddy tight. Today they absolutely crushed it. Willie dashed off to meet his brother, then leaned in and told his nephew to practice magic even harder. Right before he left, the uncle shot Zek one last look, then nodded like the progress had him convinced. When Willie ran into Gilbert, he blurted that he'd just finished training and was fresh off it. His father pressed him about his son's wins, and Willie lit up as he told everyone Zek was insanely talented and relentlessly hardworking. Within months, he clocked the kid's wild drive. Zek wasted no time, jumping straight into trying to repeat complex spells. But the thing that blew Zek's mind the most was this. Because of it, he can conjure real magical wonders. Willie finally admitted to his brother that he sometimes slips a peek into Zek's thoughts, but Gilbert shut it down fast, snapping that his son isn't some test rabbit. First, you shove Zeku a magic control task so he can lock in his power, then you worry about sending him out into the world. The brothers stared in awe at the cub's skills, and with Zek around, they all agreed one thing: life was never boring. Willie figured Haki must have been snatched by poachers long ago, because he had no doubt it came with brutal pain. Gilbert remembered the whispers about rare beast imperial auctions, and from that moment on, he slammed the border defenses shut like a fortress. The hunters were dying to catch this one-of-a-kind beast, and you've gotta watch how it evolves next. First things first, Gilbert's whole heart was locked on keeping his family safe, so he grabbed his brother's attention and demanded he stay sharp and vigilant. He gushed that Kaki was friendly and sweet, and said she slipped right into the family like she was always meant to be there. Willie didn't see a single thing wrong with that affection, because Gilbert absolutely worships his family. But Gilbert shut him down hard and slammed a stack of love letters onto the table, every single one addressed to Willie. He already knew how famous his brother was, so he tried to muscle his way through this mail avalanche and finally shut it down. And if that didn't work, he vowed he'd hand him off to the magical squad, but Willie flat out refused that reward with zero hesitation. Meanwhile, Zek was blasting magic spells in the forest, but no matter how hard he tried, the perfect result stayed out of reach. He could conjure elements with ease, but he couldn't hold them steady, and that frustration ate him alive. The boy craved the secrets to forge glass stones, because that one skill would let him tap into higher magic and finally study it for real. He leaned in and asked Mari if her stone could be reused, but she shut it down, saying it had turned into plain, ordinary glass now. She leaned in and said, "It's just a normal stone," until sacred magic seeped into it, and that's exactly how it turned holy. But if you pour in fresh magic, that stone snaps back to life, because even stronger magic still has to go through the same awakening. Those glasses are way tougher than the usual kind, which is why they're the perfect foundation for building universal magical vessels. The convict realized that if he built a bunch of them, he could keep juggling different magics, even when his power finally started to run dry. Because of that, he'll be able to fight even when everything turns critical, and he also wanted to sprinkle magical sand into the stone. The boy dug deep, summoned every ounce of strength, and fought to recreate the stone. And for a heartbeat, it looked like he'd pull it off. Then, at the very last second, he lost control, and the whole thing crumbled. This crushed him. He couldn't see what he'd done wrong at all, so the assistant told him to keep his eyes on the sand. The inmate was absolutely certain the sand was top tier. Willie had hand-picked it for his training, just for him. But the assistant warned, "Sure, the sand's top tier, but it won't hold up for S-level stone. To forge a stone like that, you've got to use the exact kind of sand, mess that up, and the magic just won't stick." The assistant told him to hunt for sand in the Forest of Silence. No, even better, in the Forest of Spirits. The inmate had never even heard of this place, so he lined in and demanded details. "He told me that the forest soil is magically fertile, so that's where we can scoop up the perfect sand, and then he offered to guide us himself." The assistant blurted, "Let's head to the Forest of Spirits," but Zek wasn't ready. Then a violent wind ripped into the scene out of nowhere. Right then, a brand new female voice burst in, sweet and joyful, saying she finally found him. A total stranger just showed up in front of him, young, stunning, and way too confident, and she talked like she'd known him forever. She bolted over and wrapped her arms around the young magician, while he twisted and strained to break free, stunned, trying to figure out who she was. The stranger told him she'd heard a ton of wild stories about him, then she bolted straight to meet him right away, while the convict just stared, utterly confused. Haki shot to her aid, climbed onto her head, and barked for her to let the master go right now, but the girl only smirked because she already knew about the tiger. She even crowned Haki as a sacred white tiger, then made sure everyone knew this truth had to stay locked down, under wraps. The tiger cub leaned in and begged her to keep it secret, and she vowed, straight from the heart, that her lips would stay sealed. The convict's eyes widened in shock. How did this loud stranger know everything about him when they'd never even met? Willie stormed in and, with a hard stare, demanded the girl leave his nephew alone. With a sharp snap of his hand, he tore himself free from the embrace, shoved Zek aside, and handed him a brief taste of calm. The stranger snapped because her joy got yanked away, and Willie quickly apologized for that totally unexpected first hit. Uncle leaned in and told her real name is Frau, the spirit of the wind, bound to him by a magical pact, and then Zek snapped back to that weird parameter hidden in Willie's traits. Willie soothed the boy, saying, "Yeah, once humans and spirits were sworn enemies, but Frau is different. She's got a kind heart." Right away, the girl made it crystal clear. She's only nice to people she genuinely likes, and yeah, especially to guys as sweet as Zek. The boy's jaw dropped when he realized she could see straight through the camouflage magic, just like him. Willie froze. His nephew could actually see Frau, something normal folks can't. He demanded Zek keep quiet about her, and Zek swore he wouldn't tell a soul. The woman leaned in, curious as hell. Was this really the first spirit in the boy's life? Zek confirmed it. The girl's cheeks flared red as his words sent shyness tumbling through her. She felt lucky to be first, thrilled by it, but he stayed on edge, still holding back. Then she swore she'd always protect him, because Willie is taking care of him, and she's making sure she'll be right there. She was instantly drawn to him, because even though he was still young, he didn't look like a kid at all. Willie warned Frau that she could meet his nephew, but she wasn't allowed to chase after him, and that hit her pride hard. The convict leaned toward the uncle and asked what was wrong with her, and Willie shot back, "That woman just doesn't get what personal space is." The girl tried to defend herself. She barely ever gets to talk to anyone, so her feelings spill out loud and messy every time. But Willie figured she'd stick out like a sore thumb in the city, and Zek nodded, promising he'd hit her with something truly interesting later. Frau was ecstatic about this meeting, so she handed Zek a gift that blindsided him completely. The cheerful girl grinned and vowed she'd fetch him the exact magical sand he needed. Turns out there wasn't a grain of sand in it right now, so she told Willie she'd go find some, because this guy's built different, and plain sand just won't do for him. For training, yeah, but Zek's got bigger dreams. He's trying to forge a real magical stone, and that means he needs the best quality material. Willie praised the kid's effort, but once he really thought it through, he admitted he couldn't offer him good sand. Willie couldn't hand his nephew the magical sand, because something huge was waiting for him in his research, and it couldn't wait a second longer. He sincerely apologized to Zek, and the kid just got it. No grudge, none of that anger, because he'd always known his uncle's work was the real deal. The lab was packed with wild, fascinating stuff, and Frau was ready to help Zek, until Willie slammed the brakes, warning her that her appearance could freak everyone out. Even in human form, she couldn't hold herself back, so going solo just wasn't an option. Frau was furious, because all she wanted was to wow Zek. So the young wizard made a bold move. He headed to the magical group by himself, without bothering a single soul. Zek's uncle was stunned by his sheer grit, but he didn't stop him, because Zek was determined to see everything with his own eyes. She lit up at his bravery, because this was his very first big trip. Willie trusted his nephew's skills, let him take the reins on his own, and the kid lit up, totally fired up to prove himself. He'd been hungry for magical experiments for ages, and now, finally, he got the chance to witness them with his own eyes. Hacky was desperate to go too, but his uncle shut it down fast, said the lab might spot such a rare creature and come sniffing around. Those arguments hit hard, and the tiger cub decided to stop, stay put, and wait for its owner at home. Willie swore he'd tell Gilbert, then leaned in and told Zek to watch his step on the road. Maria cradled Hacky in her arms and warned her brother that danger can spring up from any corner. Theo gave him a loud nod of approval, wished him a safe journey, and made it clear now was the moment to prove what he's got. Steward Hans reported that everything was finally set, and Zek tore himself away from his family, saying his goodbyes and swearing he'd be back. He sprinted to his crew with a grin. New adventures were waiting just ahead. During the trip, Zek couldn't stand it. He was aching to finally hit the capital, because this was his very first time seeing that magnificent city. Hans lit up remembering the time he and Theo hunted a monster, then swore it was a secret story, so when Zek thanked him for trusting him, it hit like a promise. The steward finally dropped the bombshell. The third magical order under Master Word isn't just powerful, it's the absolute elite when it comes to science and military might. Then he shot an apology for talking too much and promised, "We'll hit the capital soon." And just like that, from the window, the shining city, spreading over the sea like it owned the horizon, was already right there, burning bright in view. Hans said the magical building sits in the west of the capital, and the main research center is hidden in a secret place. He figured this news wouldn't grab Zek's attention at all, but the boy still dreamed of one day meeting his uncle. Hans kept the tale going, then told everyone to leave out the pointless details, then burst into a laugh. At last Zek burst into the magical building, but Hans got stopped cold at the door, because only the young mage was allowed to step inside. Anna and Hans tried to tag along with Zek, but the butler swallowed the argument and swore it would all be okay, promising the boy would be fine. Anna was fed up, but Zek swept in and soothed her, telling her to rest in the capital while he tore back to finish the job. The boy couldn't help but feel uneasy with that strange girl trailing him, but she flashed him a confident smile and promised everything was totally under control. The inmate didn't sweat a thing. He just had one mission burning in his mind, reaching the research center as fast as humanly possible. But the girl snapped at him, straight ahead. A dim, deadly passage waited. A vicious wind blew hard and spooked Zek, but the girl just kept strolling forward like it was nothing. Zek had to sprint after her. At last, colossal dark doors loomed in front of him, and fear clamped down on his heart, because this kid had no clue what horrors might be waiting on the other side. After that crushing darkness lifted, Zek's heart pounded with anxiety and pure excitement, because something unreal was about to hit him. The girl snapped the magical crystal to life, and the doors creaked open as a blinding white burst tore out of the dark. Staring through enchanted eyes, he found a whole city gathered under one colossal tree. This was the main research center. The scale was unreal. Massive buildings towered straight inside the giant tree, and a waterfall thundered down from it like the world was pouring out. The inmate stared at the weird liquid dripping off the tree and demanded, "What the heck is that flowing out?" The girl just nodded, and it hit him. This resin wasn't random at all. It powered artifacts and even magical medicine. Everything screamed that this tree was insanely rare and massively important, but the girl dodged every direct question like it was dangerous. He shot back an apology for being so loud, because he wasn't trying to be annoying. He just had to know more about the world. At last, the girl spoke. "That tree keeps growing, and its resin fuels the making of magical tools and powerful medicines. They don't toss the research waste. They turn it into fertilizer, and the researchers hit the check button on that tree every single day." The center and the tree locked into a symbiotic bond, helping each other thrive in a real give-and-take partnership. As soon as Zek stepped in, his eyes lit up at the room's beauty. Then the girl snapped and pointed to the blue door, where the system manager was waiting. She was practically ready to walk out the door, but Zek wouldn't let it end. He wanted more, to pester her with questions, to stare, to soak it all in. The girl let him stay, and the boy couldn't shake the feeling that she adored magic too. Right as Zek pushed through the door, he caught sight of a swarm of bustling lab workers, and then a voice he knew like home ripped through the air. That was Uncle Willie. He tried to say Frau, but the moment he opened his mouth, Uncle Willie shut him down with a sharp gesture. "The spirit isn't here right now, it's somewhere else." And she basically told him she couldn't wait for the next meeting, and Zek didn't even flinch after that hug. Uncle whipped out a massive magical stone, said it was a brand new teleportation artifact. Regular stones get hauled to just one spot, but this one can link up several, like it's cracking open a brand new breakthrough. The core formula was already locked in. Now all that was left was to fire up the teleport and see if it could drop him exactly on those coordinates. Willie said the project looked insanely promising because it meant you wouldn't need carts anymore, and Zek backed him up on the spot. Uncle grabbed his nephew and marched him through the other departments, and even let him see the tree up close, leaving the boy buzzing with excitement. Suddenly the room detonated with blinding light. Magic flooded the air, and the whole space seemed to push back hard. Every second the stone burned hotter and hotter. Willie snapped for the device to shut off right now, but right then, Zek's strength started slipping, and his consciousness began to fade. Pitch-black darkness swallowed the whole place, and the young mage jolted awake in a half-broken room, empty as a grave, with not a soul in sight. He was trying to figure out where he'd landed when, bam, Uncle Willie's voice suddenly cut through the air. Turns out Zeka had teleported. Thankfully, he was totally fine. Uncle shot a breath of relief and asked how he was doing. Based on rough estimates, they wound up in a dungeon, probably one of those run-of-the-mill, low-level death traps. Uncle Willie couldn't wrap his head around why they'd been teleported here. Maybe the formula glitched, or someone out there had stepped in and messed with it. The inmate leaned in, eyes locked on Willie as he tried to get his head around why they were dragging him to a whole new place. The dungeon's coordinates weren't carved into stone. Something went terribly wrong, and now you've got to scramble to find a way out. When they asked if he could go back, the uncle snapped that the dungeon has strict rules, and teleportation is a hard no here. From lush, blooming valleys to snow-capped peaks, the dungeons come in every flavor. So tell me, are we really in this world, or is it all just an illusion? Down in the shadows, powerful artifacts lie hidden, things that can flip the fate of an entire world, which is why researchers can't stop dreaming about cracking their secrets. Willie warned him that danger was lurking around every corner, but he swore a mysterious truth was waiting at the end, and the convict could feel there was an artifact here. But the uncle shot him a warning. This dungeon might have already been picked clean long ago, and there may be nothing valuable left inside. The convict still couldn't wrap his head around how the teleportation happened. Maybe it was his own gift that sparked it. To escape, they'll have to climb their way out. If a boss is waiting, they'll smash him, rip through the barrier, and hit the bottom. Willie fired a question at Zek. Want to take the boss down solo, because the kind of experience you can't earn anywhere on the surface was on the line. The boy wrestled with the idea, and his uncle fired back, saying this was the perfect chance to prove his skills in a real fight. The convict nodded in agreement, but he couldn't shake the fear. Could he really take the boss down by himself? Willie told him the boss is probably the Red Blade King, an honest-to-God's rank B monster. That convict had already crushed a goblin general of the same rank once, only back then, he wasn't standing alone. But this time, he refused to blow his shot at more experience, and his uncle fully backed him. Maybe he already knew he'd crushed the general, and that's why he didn't hesitate for a second. This dungeon isn't that terrifying. Worst case, you'll slip your way down to where Willie is waiting, ready to bail you out. Suddenly, a panicked woman's voice cut through the air, and whoa, it felt like the boss battle was about to explode into action. The guy raced to save the girl, but the uncle snapped at him not to rush. Side by side, they pushed ahead, then crashed into a bound girl with animal ears, and even Willie froze in shock. They finally crashed into the boss's lair. Now there was only one thing left: beat him and prove their training wasn't for nothing. Two gigantic coal spiders tore into the scene in front of Zek, earth element monsters, ready to crush everything. They shot out a tacky web right away, and it hit like a nasty surprise. The uncle lunged in time and snatched Zek out of the way, yanking him from the incoming hit. Willie leaned in and said, "Hit their eyes and paws, those are the weak points. Aim dead on, the way we trained." But a true fight hits different. He dug deep, gathered every last ounce of strength, and got ready to throw down. These spider bodies are basically stone, so if you want to bring them down, you'd better hit the weak spots and hit them dead on. The convict lunged ahead, hurled wind magic, and sliced one spider into ragged, flying pieces. His uncle hailed Zek's savage attack, but Zek had already clocked the enemy creeping up behind Willie. Willie, a battle-hardened warrior, snapped into action the moment the giant sea spider struck. He swung his sword so fast it barely looked real, cut the monster down before it could react, and racked up yet another win. Willie bowed to his nephew and apologized for wrecking his training target, and Zik just cackled, like, for a warrior that strong, that hit was way too easy. Then Willie urged them to save the folks still trapped in those cocoons, and he hacked straight through the giant web. The cocoons, hooked together by a thread, snapped loose and dropped in an instant. Zik spotted a girl tumble out of one right away. The young wizard snatched her before she could react. She was totally baffled, staring like she had no idea who stood in front of her, while just behind them, the others started tumbling out. A burly bald man finally ripped himself free from the trap, clutching a girl named Emma in his arms, and pure joy erupted on his face as he realized he'd just saved the first one. Emma burst into her mistress Daya's presence, and Pell exhaled in relief because after that vicious monster's attack, they were still standing, alive. Emma and Daya's panic snapped into pure joy because they were finally back together, and they were totally unharmed. But then Emma gasped. Daya's ears were showing, because the magical artifact that hid her face had snapped in the middle of the fight. Zik stared at the rescued kids, baffled, as they dissected the girl's weird look, and he just couldn't wrap his head around why they were reacting so badly. To soothe the terrified Daya, the boy tossed his cloak over her shoulders, and the giant Pell was instantly won over. Willie cut in mid-conversation, saying he and his nephew were only passing through, but once they heard that someone had been caught in the coal spider's trap, they didn't hesitate to help. Pell spotted the Justimage's guild mage outfit on Willie, and even the tiniest wizard in the room couldn't believe it. Willie and Zik started tearing through the chaos as their saviors, and Pell thanked them. Then Willie cut in fast. The real hero is Zik, he just lent a hand. The burly Pell was blown away by the boy's guts, so he threw him a grateful thanks, then turned to the others, telling them to go hunt down the remaining cocoons next. Uncle Willie felt doom creeping in. Those leftover cocoons looked like trouble waiting to hatch. Willie told everyone, voice shaking, that inside this dungeon there's no such thing as a fresh body, meals rot within hours, and people aren't any different. And those spiders suck the life right out of their victims, so getting trapped in their webs means a death that's brutal and almost instant. Pell decided to drag the armor of the fallen warriors back home, and Willie nodded hard, because that was the only move they had. The battlefield mourned the knights who bled out for her, because they'd been loyal to the crown from the start. Zik regretted showing up too late. Maybe then he could have saved the guards, but Daya stopped him cold, telling him not to chew himself up, because those warriors had already stepped into death ready and willing. Seeing her in that much pain, the boy quickly reached into his pocket and offered her the sweets he'd brought from his own world. These were Zick's favorite treats, cooked up by his top chef, so good the guy swore they'd instantly boost the girl's mood. Daya was starving, but she took the treat just to be polite. Then the first bite hit, and she snapped her eyes wide in pure shock because the taste was unreal. Zick lit up and offered even more, but the girl shook her head. She refused to take advantage of his kindness. Meanwhile, Pell swore he'd already collected the dead man's belongings, while Willie hustled to set up the magical tent so the knights could hammer out their next move. Zick froze in shock. He never knew his uncle had a magical tent, and Daya was still scrambling for a way to thank him for every bit of help he'd given. She thanked him for taking care of her, and for those ridiculously delicious sweets, then quickly apologized for not introducing herself sooner. At last, the girl flashed a confident smile and said, "I'm Diana von Estania, the third princess of the Kingdom of Estonia." That young magician had absolutely no clue a real princess had been standing right in front of him the entire time. Meanwhile, Willie scoured the wreckage and spotted leftover protective magic etched into the debris, so that's why nobody felt the fight, even though it was happening right there, breathing down their necks. Everything felt wildly mysterious, and suspicious. Willie couldn't take it anymore, so he chased the truth to find out what really happened. Right then, two knights, Camel and Daniela, snapped back to their senses, and even after all that brutal unconsciousness, they realized they actually felt surprisingly fine. Daya brought in her maid, Emma Granger, and the two girls wasted no time, thanking the knights for saving them. Pell from Barchmuda stepped up and introduced himself as a count, but then laughed and said he absolutely doesn't look like any aristocrat. Diana didn't just say it, she confirmed Pell is the one she leans on when things get brutal, the one she trusts with zero doubt. The fox giant finally admitted it. Yeah, he'd heard of Willie, the so-called Red Mage, and he knew the Pella family churned out top-notch knights. Spotted Willie's blazing red hair, Pell's instincts started firing off questions about where he came from, and the coat of arms on his cloak sealed it, confirming exactly what Pell feared was true. Diana nearly choked when she found out Willie was an Abel. She'd heard nothing but rumors about that legendary family. Willie quickly apologized for not introducing himself sooner, then proudly announced, "I'm the third vice-commander of the Kingdom of Mangasta's Magical Order." Once everyone finished introducing themselves, the real mystery kicked in, how they all got trapped in this dungeon, and nobody had a clear answer because the teleportation system simply glitched. The second they were relocated, the coal spiders lunged for the enclosure and snapped it up in cocoons within moments. Zick finally got it. Every last person had gone through the same nightmare. Pell snapped, "If the princess vanishes, the whole kingdom is doomed," and then she hit the truth harder, "Bring her back alive." So Pell begged Willie to tap into his magic and come help, because he's a powerhouse mage straight from the Abel house. Zick pushed the idea of teaming up since they both wanted the same escape, and it would be way easier to break out together. The uncle didn't even look shocked. Willie jumped at the chance to agree, but before he said yes, he slammed one crucial condition on the table. First, nobody was allowed to learn Zick was in this dungeon, so everyone had to stamp their name on a magic oath scroll and swear it under contract. Camel's rage flared the second he heard that demand, but Zick was completely lost. He couldn't figure out what contract they meant or why it set Camel off like that. Camel leaned in and said, "That scroll of oath. It's the most brutal magical contract there is. Break it, and you'll get punished, no limits, even death." This agreement comes with brutal limits, so the moment Zick realized what it meant, shock hit him hard, and he understood the situation was deadly serious. Camel snapped that the contract was off the table, too dangerous, it could get the princess killed, but Willie shot back, "No deal, no help." The magician swore he'd keep Zick's presence hidden in this place, no matter what. Everything else paled in comparison. The princess listened to every word, then, boom, declared that Mr. Zick was a true treasure from her own generous heart. Zick froze at her words, and his uncle snapped him back to reality, telling him he's a special kid meant for something huge, a mission that can't wait. Willie bragged that his nephew is a total standout in the Abel family, destined to step into some incredible, special purpose. Zick finally caught what his uncle was really hinting at. There was something bigger than magical talent hiding in those words, even if the truth wasn't meant to surface yet. In the end, Diana finally signed the contract, even though every line of those terms felt one-sided and downright unfair. Zick nodded fast, then leaned in and asked, "Sure, but does the princess have any tricks of her own so we can strike a deal like this too?" That girl made her choice. She said risking it all wasn't even necessary, because come on, it couldn't be just her and Zick who refused to play it safe. Zick demanded they win the princess's trust and guard each other's secrets, right as Diana quietly slid off her hood. She begged them to keep the truth about her strange ears locked up, and the moment Kamla and Daniela saw her, their faces went wide with shock. Willie insisted she'd looked like this since birth, and he was dead right. Diana explained it happens when blood from different races runs together in a family. But for someone in the royal family, this isn't good at all. It's pure weight, a burden hanging from the neck. Zick finally understood, right then, just how brutal the world can be toward people like them. Diana told me she usually masks her appearance with an artifact, but after the spider attack, it shattered. Now everyone can see her true self. Don't let a single soul uncover her origins. Half-blood or not, she has no right to hold power. Diana laid down the rule. The secret stays locked tight until she steps out and announces the truth herself. Willie sat there lost in thought as Zick swore he'd never betray the princess or her family. His uncle didn't even bat an eye at the decision. He went straight for the contract, swapping the death penalty for a terrifying choice, punishment through memory loss or death. The princess lit up with joy and hauled in the young mage, thanking him for his bravery and his kindness. Everyone started scrambling to get ready for the magical contract signing, while Willie flicked on a special magical screen. In just a few minutes, the deal was sealed. Willie drove home that the secret had to stay buried at any cost, but Camel wasn't satisfied yet, while Pell only had one thing on his mind: getting the wise mage's backing. Willie promised he'd guide everyone out of the dungeon, because the participants' honesty finally convinced him, while Pell beamed, knowing the princess was in safe hands now. Zick swore Diana he'd have her back, and he was sure every last one of them would live through it, while the princess trusted him with every word. While Diana and Zick were trading sweet words, Willie was busy thinking of something else. Thanks to that contract, he finally took the steps he'd been hiding from his nephew. To keep Zika safe from traitors, the mage tightened his grip, turning colder, harder, and far more careful. The scorched chunks of that magic stone practically screamed danger as its protective energy flared, and the barrier only snapped into place after everyone got tossed into the dungeon. Willie knew someone had purposely yanked away the outside help, and that was only the first ugly piece of the bigger disaster. Everything screamed that one of the rescued was a traitor, someone who wanted the princess dead, but the real question was, who was it? Even with the danger hanging over them, Willie stayed stone-calm about Zick, because the guy knew how to back himself up. Right now, the only thing that matters is hunting down the enemy. The moment Zick opened his eyes, the first thing he caught was his beloved uncle's grin. Willie was right there, greeting him bright and early. Zick demanded, "Who are you talking to?" And Willie snapped back, "I'm just watching my nephew," even though he was meant to guard the tent. Then the boy remembered his job, and his face twisted with instant rage. Zick spotted his new friends were worn out, so he ushered them into the magical tent to crash and rest. Then he took his post by the entrance, trying to guard the place, and right there, he nodded off and fell asleep. Willie softly told him it was still way too early to take the guard while everyone slept, but Zick wouldn't hear it. He just wanted to help. His uncle burst into laughter, like he could see the boy chasing a wild dream of living in a grand adventure world, and then Zick shrugged it off. He just wants to get stronger. Zick secretly craved a life where he'd become an adventurer, battling monsters side by side with Theo, chasing glory and getting rich. Willie clocked his nephew's embarrassment and snapped that he was acting like a kid who wanted to grow up way too fast, then told him, "Just don't laugh." Right then, Emma barged in and dragged everyone to breakfast. Willie told them he'd spotted the knights coming back with ingredients, so you've got to see what they cooked up. Zick was stunned, because nobody had even left when he blinked. Within minutes, everyone stared in awe at the feast laid out on that table, especially the piping hot, mouth-watering soup, and you could tell right away there was a real master chef hiding in the crowd. Zick clocked how closely Diana studied the food, and it was obvious she had a soft spot for that fresh sandwich. Emma told me how she stumbled into a magical tent, then cooked up mouth-watering dishes that felt like pure magic. The Fox Knight bowed with real gratitude to Willie and Zick. Because of them, they didn't just get to rest, they got to sleep safe and protected. Meanwhile, Zick slid Princess Diana half his sandwich, and you could practically see how much she loved it. She blinked in shock, because she couldn't figure out how he'd known. The wizard grinned and said he could read everything from the way her tail moved. Then the second those words landed, Diana's face flared red. She asked if it disgusted him, and Zick snapped back that no, nothing about it was weird at all. It was downright sweet. Rage exploded in Camel's chest as he snapped at the boy not to dare offend the princess. Then Zick started fumbling through excuses, insisting he was only being misunderstood. But the knight refused to cool off and raged about punishment even though the boy was young. Then, out of nowhere, a knife slammed onto the table right beside his face. Willie calmly told the furious knight to back off and let the kids eat in peace, and the second the message hit, Camel's face went red as he hurriedly apologized. Diana reassured the loyal guard that all was well. Zik had only laid down a few flattering compliments. Calm as ever, Daniela leaned in and asked what was next. She needed to know exactly how they were going to move forward. She said the quickest move was simple: take out the dungeon's boss. Willie nodded. Magic had already tipped him off that the guy was sitting on the top floor, right up there. That has to be the king of the Red Blade, and we're going to smash our way through a ton of monsters on the road. But don't worry, they're weak, and if we team up, nothing can stop us. Camel still simmered with frustration. He just couldn't wrap his head around how a mage could size up danger from far away, and then Willie snapped the truth back. Not enemies, it was the terrain. Unlike Camel, Daniela breathed out in gratitude, because seasoned mages truly can sense danger ahead of time, and that kind of foresight is pure gold. Zik took his uncle's example to heart, dreamed of climbing to the same heights, and even though he was hooked on magic, he still craved plenty of other skills too. Pell suggested they sprint out right after breakfast, if the princess gives the okay, and he thanked Willie and Zik for their help, calling it absolutely priceless. Camel groaned through clenched teeth. Some mystery mage was stealing the princess's attention, and it sparked pure irritation in his chest, so he snapped that there were only geniuses everywhere. After breakfast, Daniela leaned in and told her partner, quietly but clearly, that she'd spotted Willie in the morning, reporting something while clutching a shard of a magical stone. Everyone probably wound up here because of this stone. Willie's been muttering about it since this morning. Rage burned in Camel's eyes. He blamed the wizard for every last disaster, and he finally decided it was time to warn the others. Daniela snapped at everyone to stay calm, because if anyone dares oppose the mage right now, he'll wipe out everyone, and nobody will be able to stop him. Camel finally caved in and agreed, even though the regret hit him instantly. He couldn't jump in right then. Still, Daniela promised she'd find another way, and she pushed the one name that could turn everything around. His brother, the legendary knight. Camel couldn't forget how his entire life had been lived in his brother's shadow, the perfect hero everyone worshipped. He swore that becoming a knight would finally earn him recognition, but no matter how hard he pushed, everyone kept lining him up against his brother. Daniela finally confessed. She was the one who pushed his name forward as the princess's guard, because she clocked the strength in him and the courage burning in his bones. Camel was blown away and thanked Daniela from the heart for trusting him, and she made it clear, if they stay side by side, no threat can stop them. And most importantly, only by standing together can they beat the Red Mage. No one else can do it. Daniela's words lit a fire in Camel, and he swore he'd guard the princess to the very end. Already on the dungeon's 24th floor, Zik wiped out the minor monsters with zero effort and hauled food back for the whole squad. The Fox Knight stared in disbelief as the boy single-handedly took down group after group of creatures, but Willie's eyes narrowed. This is only the start, and Zik still has a mountain of skills to learn. Now Pell finally got why Willie wouldn't let it go. The magical contract wasn't a joke. Zik was real, alive, and absolutely priceless. The young mage wrapped up the hunt, hauled back a mountain of meat and other ingredients, then practically burst with excitement. Today, we're eating a delicious lunch. But suspicious Knight Camel wasn't having it. He couldn't wrap his head around why the monsters' bodies vanished, then got replaced by nothing but pure meat. Willie broke it down. When you kill these monsters, their bodies don't just vanish. They morph into pure energy that feeds this dungeon, and everyone knows that's how it works. The main chunk vanishes in a blink, but the good stuff drops right where it lands, so you can scoop it up or use it to eat. Camel realized that sometimes they don't even have to cook. There are whole ready-made dishes waiting for them, and it's way faster and way easier. Willie couldn't pin down a real answer. Maybe the dungeon was built by ancient people as some kind of farm, but Camel still felt the same chill of frightening magic. Meanwhile, Zik clocked the sadness on Diana's face and dashed over, promising her that together they'd steamroll any danger that came their way. Diana snapped back that she wasn't scared, but the moment she caught sight of her fluffy tail, she blushed again. Zik rushed to apologize, because he had no idea how to calm her down. The princess demanded to know if he wasn't terrified to face those monsters alone. Zik confessed that it scared him half to death, but he had no choice. He just wants to guard the people he loves, and if monsters come calling, he'll throw himself into a fight without hesitation. Diana was hanging on every word, but Zik only smirked and brushed it off as childish dreams. Yet the truth was, he already dreamed of traveling and learning everything he could someday. That boy blushed as he admitted he still sometimes fears monsters, but deep down, growth calls louder, and he's determined to change, level up, and beat those fears for good. And monotony drives him insane. He craves the road. Diana listened hard and instantly understood him. She remembered the truth. Her entire life was sealed behind the palace walls, dressed in comfort, but never allowed the one thing she craved, the freedom the servants quietly gave her. Diana could need the easy lives of those kids, free to sprint anywhere, with no chains of status or crushing responsibilities holding them back. Zick picked up on her feelings and swept her toward a safe, beautiful spot nearby, then suggested they spend the whole day together. Strange, sweet-smelling fruits dangled from the trees, and right behind them sat a fountain glowing with mystery, so Zick leaned in and said we should go check this place out together. Diana couldn't wait to get a breath of fresh air, and then Zick shot his hand out, telling her not to be scared, because they were together. When danger rears its head, he'll shield her with his life, no question. The princess lit up and happily accepted his invitation. Right then, Camel burst in and snapped at Zick to stay away from the princess, while Willie told him not to scare the kids. No monsters are coming, because Pell is always right there with Emma. The Fox Knight finally confessed he'd never seen the princess beam like that, and Willie only grinned, because he'd never once doubted his nephew's kindness. Zick and Diana soaked up the walk like it was a breather. For a little while they forgot every last worry. Then they bit into pear-shaped fruits and roamed the area, discovering every hidden corner around them. Night Pell hovered nearby at all times, and every time monsters tried to wreck their rest, he burst in and tore them down. After that long trek, Zick and Diana slid into the lunch crowd, then headed out for round 2, while Camel fumed, silently tracking every single move Zick made. While they were out walking, they stumbled on a hidden path that led straight to eerie ancient doors. This was the entrance to the dungeon's final level. Willie leaned in and said, "On the other side is the main boss. Beat them, and the way to the surface will finally open." Camel told Willie to stop wasting time and jump into the fight right now, but Willie snapped back. This was a rank B boss, and charging in without rest would be pure stupidity. The wizard told everyone to hunker down for the night and wait until morning for the final battle, and he pressed Zick the hardest to rest up, because he may soon have to clash on equal terms. Willie said, "This is probably the last night in this dungeon, but don't you all put the whole weight on my shoulders." That evening, Diana decided she couldn't sleep without talking to Zick. She was terrified, and she refused to say goodbye to her brand new friends just like that. Zick froze when the princess showed up, alone. Turns out Emma and Pell had given her a little window to talk with him in private. Willie wasn't against talking at all, but he still refused to let the kids roam the dungeon unsupervised, and that's why Diana stepped in to win him over. She told him this could be the last night they'd ever talk in peace, because once morning hits, their paths are about to split for good. Willie nodded, then for safety, he snapped a tracking spell on them and trapped them in an ice cage, so the second danger hit, he could rush in and save them right away. Zick grinned and pitched a cozy spot he'd stumbled across while hunting for food, and the princess instantly said yes. Then they took off for the beach. Willie sat there, stone certain that even if Zick got attacked right then, nothing disastrous would hit. But while Pell and Emma were busy cooking dinner, he stood guard, ready to keep a close watch on what tomorrow would bring. The wizard needed the traitor exposed fast, and this was the perfect opening to bait him into moving. Right then, Camel clocked Daniela clenching something in her hands and blurted, "Wait, what are those magical tools?" She said the artifact could track Princess Diana's every move and even report how she was doing, so Camel froze in shock, totally confused about why anyone would need something like that. Daniela swore she'd set a trap for the Red Mage, then grabbed Camel and ordered him to take the magic stone and carry out her plan. She insisted every bit of this was to keep the princess safe, and Camel was ready to do whatever it took, because Daniela made it crystal clear. There's only one shot, and if anyone messes up, it's over. They've got one shot, wipe out that treacherous mage, or they'll never make it home alive and safe. Meanwhile, Diana and Zick burst into a wide open spot where the sky exploded with stars, and Diana couldn't believe she'd ever get to see something this beautiful here. To wow his friend, Zick used magic to conjure a bunch of plush, round little seats. He said those chairs are made for true comfort, and the moment Diana smiled, she flopped into one like she already owned it. Zick sank into the soft cushions and smiled. This felt amazing. Then she leaned in and asked him, straight up, what she wanted to talk about. The princess looked at the boy and called him incredible, because even though they were the same age, Zick carried a mind full of knowledge and warmth that felt totally real. She wanted to thank him properly, right on the princess's behalf, and if he ever gets stuck, she told him he can come to her anytime for help. Zick basically labeled himself a newbie. He wasn't an expert by any means, but his drive burned hot as he begged to learn more and get stronger. Meanwhile, Willie's thoughts spiraled to his nephew, and then it hit him hard. Zick has no idea just how special he really is. Then Zick leaned in and grilled the princess about gemstones. Turns out, Diana knew almost nothing about them at all. She told the whole story about how the Zika family helped kickstart the kingdom, and how they were even handed the title of marquises. Best of all, because they were related to the founder's second son, they were elevated into the second royal family. Zik had heard the same kind of warning before, straight from his uncle's mouth, while Diana chimed in that the Abel family had been guarding something priceless for centuries. She dubbed it the Abel family treasure, but Zik just couldn't make sense of it. Willie had never once mentioned a word about it. Diana spilled the rumors. This treasure chooses talented kids, but the truth is sharper. Only royal families and the ruling class can truly access it. Abel's family will never let anyone who stumbles onto their treasure walk away, and Zik had no clue just how priceless it really was. Diana had no more answers, but she was sure that when the moment hit, Zik would finally learn the truth straight from his relatives, so he thought it over and nodded along. She promised them both that they'd finally get the truth about their fate, then told them to look a little closer, only for Zik to burst out laughing, because it was way too vague to mean anything. Diana nodded, burst into laughter, and said it felt like she'd known the young mage for ages. Then she asked him to just call her by her name. Zik froze at the request, then nervously called out her name, still baffled why she wanted it so badly, while Diana had no clue how she was even supposed to explain it. Finally, the princess broke her silence and confessed she wants to be Zik's real friend because she might never see him again. Then she thanked him, voice shaking, for every unforgettable moment they shared. The princess swore she'd hold on to these moments for the rest of her life, because for the first time, she tossed aside the weight of her title and stopped hiding behind shame about how she looked. When she finally returns home, she'll be thrown back into an ordinary princess life, and all the freedom she has here will vanish like smoke. That's why she's desperate to talk to Zik as an equal. Zik stared at her in shock, because he'd always assumed princesses looked down on folks like her. But now he admitted it. He was genuinely relieved to see Diana as just his peer and his friend, and he couldn't stop himself from wondering what her ponytail would say, because it always gave away her mood. Zik warned them, don't lose touch, even once we're out of this dungeon. We'll trade letters and we'll meet again someday. The princess lit up at the idea and agreed on the spot. She couldn't wait to see Zik again. He stared at her like the answer was right in front of him, thinking that someday she'd turn into something stunning, but right now, they're just kids. Meanwhile, Willie kept his eyes locked on Zik and Diana as they backed off to a safe distance, while Pell and Emma stayed in the tent, totally oblivious to everything unfolding. The night's strange move sent shockwaves through everyone. Every search came up empty, so it was clear they'd slipped away using some kind of special magic to vanish. Willie snapped into action. If Camel and Daniela are really concealing something, then Zik could already be in real danger. Suddenly, he spotted someone cradling his nephew in their arms, and the magician barked, "Stop," because he had to save Zik. No one could figure out how the traitors smashed their way out of the ice cage, and then the princess vanished without a trace. Raging with fury, Willie chose to wipe out every single knight who dared lay a hand on his nephew, and he didn't care who got struck first. Camel finally exhaled. Where the mage was supposed to be, there was nothing but wreckage, total and unforgiving. He was sure Willie had gone up in that explosion and never came back. But his victory lasted only a heartbeat. Daniela drove a sword into his back, shattering every hope and ending his life. She snapped that Camel was an idiot, still clueless about her betrayal, then shrugged like his death was more than fair. Daniela even thanked him for his foolish move, because no other knight would have swallowed that trap so easily. Camel, mortally wounded, could only stare in raw disappointment. She snapped that he was the most useless knight alive, so she threw him at the job as the princess's guard, because even an idiot, she figured, couldn't possibly keep her safe from a monster. Even a fool with a strange, magical relic could still land a hit on a terrifying mage. Daniela was grinning after that victory. Now all she needed was to kill the children that night, because then her mission couldn't be stopped, and Camel was throwing everything he had at her to stop it. The girl slammed him with another crushing blow and admitted it. Camel could have grown into an incredible knight, but the truth hit hard. He was weak, and now he was dead in some nameless dungeon. And because he'd always been stuck in his older brother's shadow, once he vanished, nobody would lift a finger, just toss him away and forget him like he never mattered. Those were the last words Camel heard, and right as his life slipped away, regret crushed him for ignoring the betrayal too late. Zik and Diana heard a deafening explosion, and their blood ran cold. Something awful had gone down. They sprinted back to the magical tent. Right then, those massive doors to the boss's dungeon swung wide, and Emma and Count Pell stumbled in right behind them, still shaken to the core from that explosion. Diana demanded answers, but the bald knight himself couldn't explain a thing. He only knew this. They were in the tent, a brutal explosion ripped through the air, and he immediately sprang into action. But when they tried to slip out, they hit a magical barrier sealing the tent from all sides, and they couldn't figure out who cast it or how. Pell finally smashed through the barrier, but the second they stepped outside, there were no explosions and no screams, just an eerie silence that felt wrong. Zick frantically scanned the crowd for his uncle. Then Daniela popped up and told him the brutal truth. She and Camel had been right where Willie was supposed to be. Blood soaked the girl as she snapped that whoever's behind the mysterious teleportation had ambushed them and dragged them right here into this dungeon. Daniela jabbed at the giant doors and yelled that's where the criminal had slipped out. Willie and Camel launched into a chase, and before the dust even settled, she pushed for immediate help while Count Pell nodded and agreed. The cunning knight told the princess to stay put, warning that hidden accomplices might be lurking just outside the door, but Diana snapped back with a refusal, and Zick swore he'd protect her no matter what. Beyond those giant doors, a huge hall blasted open. Right in the center sat the dungeon's most terrifying threat, a rank B boss. Diana clocked him instantly, no doubt about it, the king of the Red Blade, a walking nightmare with strength so monstrous it barely made sense. Zick scanned the crowd for Willie and came up empty, then demanded where Uncle and Camel had gone only for Daniela to grin and cackle like something bad was coming. The next second the door slammed shut and Daniela snapped, calling everyone fools before she sparked the magical portal to life. She didn't bother hiding anymore. She was a full-on traitor who baited the princess straight into a deadly trap, and Pell finally got it. That's who she really was. Daniela felt totally safe. She even swore that Willie and Camel were already dead, but Zick wouldn't buy it, not for a second. Daniela shrugged and said she didn't care who believed her. If the Red Mage were alive, he'd be here already, and right then, the boss started to move. Daniela decided to turn the duel into something brutal. She pumped the king full of magic, just to watch that princess die. Rage surged through Diana, and Zick snapped his ability to life, evaluative eye. He caught Daniela's curse in action, and suddenly the boss's powers started going haywire, because nobody could measure his true strength anymore. All that's left to stop the monster is one deadly crack, lightning, and while it's trembling in that weakness, Daniela is already summoning fresh creatures. Dark magic detonated out of nowhere, and the traitor demanded they all stand there, stone-cold and calm, as the princess's death played out, because no one gets to live. Count Pell barked for Zika to run with Diana, because if he didn't, the last shred of hope would be gone for good. Zick nodded and pushed forward to guide the scared Diana out. Using the evaluating eye, he clocked that shut door, and boom, this was their opening. Right as Daniela reached for the doors, she got ambushed. Zick snapped up a glowing barrier to shield the princess, then launched a brutal wind strike back. The young mage realized one brutal truth. If he didn't destroy the king of the Red Blade, there'd be no escape at all, because his enemy was just too powerful. Your only move is to smash the magical stone Daniela, jammed into the boss's body, but it's wrapped in layers of barriers that refuse to let it go. If lightning won't cut it, he has to slam in a different heavy magic to punch through their defense, yet there's only a 20% shot it even works. Zick realized the truth. His body could unleash powerful magic only one time, and if he slipped up for even a second, everything would be gone. Constantly playing defense won't save him. Sooner or later, those shields crack, and with them, every last hope goes down with a crash. Suddenly, Diana pitched a wild plan, becoming living bait for the monster, and Zick shot it down on the spot. But the princess snapped, "I can't fight, yet under this barrier I can blind them, throw them off balance." Right then, Zick and Pell roared forward and tore the creatures to pieces. Even if she's gone, it opens a door for others to live, and to her, that was the only sacrifice she could live with. Zick hated the idea outright, but Diana stood her ground. She was ready to risk her life, and she refused to let those words be wasted. She'd already decided Zick was her friend, so she wouldn't let anything happen to him. So when the magician tried to say no, he couldn't, and he gave in. But deep down, he decided to do things his own way. He pushed for them to escape together. Then he bolted past the boss and, like lightning, cut off his arm. Then Zick wrapped the princess in a protective cocoon, shielded her like she was priceless, and swore he'd do anything to keep her safe and stop the losses from piling up again. The young mage refused to believe he stumbled into this dungeon by luck. This had to be fate. But here's the problem. The enemy only crumbled under lightning, and Zick couldn't use it. The odds were basically gone, but he snapped and chose to rewrite everything. He had one shot to do the impossible, because if he didn't win, there was no way forward. Zick burned with one goal, to protect the people he loved most, and this was the exact second it mattered most, so he surged into battle, blade blazing like fire. If he wins, he might live, but there's no promise that the magical stone will shatter on his first try. Suddenly it hit me. The boss had already stitched that severed hand back together, and his power kept surging higher. And then wham! A blinding lightning bolt tore across the sky, and the explosion rocked everything to its core. Diana couldn't accept that the one friend and protector she had was gone for good, and right then, Daniela came marching toward her. But thanks to the light barrier, Willie was still alive, barely, and he knew he had to force himself to his feet. Suddenly, Zick snapped to attention. Someone was calling his name, praising him as the first one who found him, and that voice felt like it had a heartbeat. A white butterfly drifted past, and Zick's memory snapped to it. He'd seen it ages ago, because that voice said only through this one could the true address be heard. The boy couldn't place who was talking to him, but deep down he knew this wasn't some ordinary presence. Then the black sword rose before him, and Zick suddenly remembered his uncle's warning: every dungeon hides an artifact, just waiting to be found. It was this sword that called to him, urging him to strike now, push every ounce of strength he had, because time was slipping away fast. Zick made his call. This was it, no second chance, and he would chase that artifact with everything he had, even if it meant risking everything on the final shot. The sword blinked at the boy's stubborn fire, declaring him still not ready to be a real gem, but then it snapped in, ready to back a kid who isn't scared of a single fight. Daniela hurled herself at Diana's barrier, trying to crack it wide open, while at the same time striking Count Pell to punch through his defenses. After a flurry of brutal hits, the princess's guard finally cracked. The traitor stepped in, met Diana's gaze, and demanded she accept death. She looked at everyone like they were pathetic, and she just wanted to crush her mission fast, tear down one more worthless being. A blinding swirl of magical light erupted behind Daniela. She snapped her head around and froze at what she saw. Zick finally mastered the rare artifact's power. Now that sword in his hands could cut down any enemy lurking in this dungeon. The princess didn't fight back when they seized her, and Daniela couldn't wrap her head around it. Somehow that massive sword had transformed into a sleek rapier. She roared at Zick to surrender, right now, because otherwise she'd kill him, but deep down the kid felt power surge in his bones, and he absolutely refused to fold. With the black rapier in hand, he tore open a magical hurricane in midair, yet even after pouring out every last ounce of magic, he didn't crumble, because the sword held him up the whole time. Zick trusted his own strength with zero doubt. Certain victory was coming. Now all that was left was to land the final hit on the boss, and the traitor too. He launched a lightning-fast assault, and a blazing burst exploded forward, swallowing the giant opponent whole. The main boss took that hit and just shattered. His body burst into hundreds of thousands of pieces, flying everywhere. Zick burned with belief. Fate wasn't written anywhere else, it was in his hands. When he finally made it back to the princess, exhaustion hit him hard, straight in the chest. Diana was beaming, because God had probably spared Zick for a reason that mattered. Daniela seethed. She'd lost again. The artifact turned out to be pointless, and once more her whole plan blew up in her face. Snatching the black dagger, the traitor swore she'd wipe them all out herself. She'd die with them if she had to. Right then, a sharp burst of pain ripped through her hand. She dropped the dagger and vanished as a threat. The traitor barely had a heartbeat to catch his breath when the door split open. An explosive blast roared through the room, and Zick snapped to it, hearing a voice he knew all too well. It was the mighty wizard Willie, injured to the bone, yet still clutching the dead body of the naive knight camel in his arms, rage burning hot as he swore to get revenge on Daniela. The woman who thought he was dead went rigid with terror, and Willie charged into the arena to force her to pay for every last crime. His motions were pure lightning. Pell didn't even clock how he'd popped up right beside him, and yet the knight stayed just out of reach. Pell caught sight of Willie cradling the wounded camel, and the mage snapped. Yeah, the knight betrayed them, but he still saved him, because dying like that would have hurt everyone else. Pell and Emma's jaws dropped. Camel had been a traitor all along too, and Daniela was already gearing up for the final battle, brimming with confidence that she could crush the wounded mage. She unleashed arrows forged in dark magic, and Willie snapped up a blinding light shield to knock everyone aside. Then he unleashed a massive magical whirlwind, and Daniela got so terrified she finally felt powerless for the first time. The second she tried to run, Willie snapped an ice cage shut around her, trapping her in cold silence and forcing her to pay for every single thing. The mage told Daniela, "Your kingdom's weapons can't kill me," and her whole world went silent, because her artifact was forged right there. Willie spotted the master's mark etched into the fragments, but the real shock hit harder. The traitor was from the very same country too. Daniela refused to trust the magician's words, but Willie was done with her lying, so he drove a needle into her leg and made her choke on silence. The magician didn't bother with small talk. He reached straight into her mind and pulled out exactly what he needed. Right when the needles were about to sink into Daniela's head, a violent explosion ripped through the air. Willie had no clue where she vanished to until it clicked. After the boss went down, that teleport stone popped out, and that's exactly how she escaped. Right before she vanished, Daniela spat a vicious curse at the red mage and swore he'd be forced to beg for mercy. Willie realized he could have stopped her if he hadn't hesitated, then he felt it hit too late because the stone had already done its work. Zick, wrung out and breathless, finally felt relief when his uncle was still alive. Daniela had slipped away, and now everything would be okay, until the boy crashed into a deep, heavy sleep. Willie leaned in and reassured her, Zick's okay. He just burned through every ounce of magic and crashed. Give him some peace and he'll be back. Diana finally let out a breath of relief at how everything turned out, thanking Willie, yet the wizard still looked pissed, convinced he'd run late. He was sure that if he'd shown up just a few minutes late, the princess and everyone with her would have been dead. Willie finally snapped out of the guilt and refused to blame himself anymore. Then he told Diana to go find Pell and Emma, too, since they were hurt as well. Once they got treated, they'd be able to surface again. Meanwhile, Zick's mind snapped into a whole new space, and a warm, familiar voice softly called his name like it had been waiting for him. In the very next breath, the boy was tucked into his mother's arms. He couldn't make sense of how it happened, but he felt those gentle hands holding him like the whole world was safe. Lyra gazed at her son with pure tenderness, because the last time she'd seen him, he was still tiny, and now he was almost grown. She apologized for that sudden run-in, because it was the only shot they'd get to talk after that long, brutal separation. Zick's tears spilled before he could stop them. He begged her forgiveness for missing her illness and for doing nothing to help, and Lyra just shook her head, telling him he wasn't responsible for any of it. She said this isn't just an illness, it's a deadly curse. Then she didn't waste time. She had one mission, to put something truly extraordinary into his hands. She pulled out the magical stone and hailed it as a legendary treasure. Its power had guarded her all this time, and now it was the only thing keeping Zick safe until he was born. Lyra couldn't stomach handing this crushing fate to her son, but no matter what she does, destiny won't back down. The young mage blurted to his mother, "What is the Abel family treasure, really?" And Lyra shot back, "Start with the gods, because that's where it all begins." Long ago, one of the gods from the divine kingdom forged this world, and he was so in love with what he made that he kept slipping down to the people, spending bright, joyful days with them. Then the battle for the throne detonated across the god world, and even the kind creator of humans got dragged into the chaos. His enemies were coming to steal his power of creation. To save humanity, the god shattered his own soul into deadly fragments, tucked all his power inside, and hurled those pieces across the world, so even other gods couldn't find them. The real treasure, those priceless fragments, was locked away in the dungeons, and the god handed the most important piece of power only to the people he trusted with everything. That's how his power's core got handed to someone from the Abel bloodline, and that's why their family became the guardians of a force so huge and dangerous it couldn't be left to anyone else. No one knows what God did next, but Zick had to get to the bottom of why their bloodline guards the greatest treasure on Earth. And now that this secret is out, anyone who protects that power gets marked for death. Some rush to smash it, others scramble to seize it. Lyra couldn't breathe easy, because she already knew the crushing weight her little son would have to carry. She cradled him close, and Zick felt this unbelievable weight lift off his soul, because even dead, his mother still hunts for ways to protect him. He told her, "Don't worry, whatever fate throws our way, I'll keep fighting, because I've got a one-of-a-kind strength inside me." Beside him, friends will always be there. Zick's already crossed paths with people he wants to protect, and he's convinced more faces are coming, one meeting at a time. The boy poured out his heart, saying this world is full of people he'd die to protect, so he's ready to claim the Abel family's treasure. He's going to step up as the real guardian of the Creator's legacy, and then he'll stand between this world and the evil that's trying to enslave it. Zick swore that when the storm finally ended, he'd live on his own terms, with the people he loves, and he'd never forget his mother, the one who prayed for his happiness. Lyra, trembling with emotion, pulled her beloved son into one more tight embrace and begged him, "Don't trade your own happiness for the mission. Life is meant to be joyful." Her biggest dream is simple. Her little boy gets to live forever in peace, wrapped in light and love, with happiness stretching on and on. Then right in that instant, the guide's voice between life and death rang out, and the meeting was over for good. Lyra thanked him for the gift. She said goodbye to her most precious treasure, because she couldn't hold on to it, but swore she'd keep watching over it forever. Zick still craved to stay with her, but the universe wouldn't let him. Lyra drifted farther and farther away, and as her goodbye, she whispered, "When you spot a white butterfly, remember me." In the blink of an eye, her body burst into hundreds of snow-white butterflies, and with a trembling, barely their voice, she vowed she'd always be nearby. Tears poured down the boy's cheeks as he reached for his mother's hand, then found nothing but the cold white shimmer of wings. Everything snapped to an end as fast as it started. Zik blinked awake, stared up at the bright sun, and before he could process it, Kaki launched into his arms. Right beside him, Theo, his anxious sister, and his serious father, Gilbert, hovered in tense silence, both desperate for him to snap out of it. Zik grinned. This was the greatest dream of his whole life. Then he demanded how he ended up on top, and his father said Willie had told him exactly where to go. Gilbert said Princess Diana is safe, but tension is choking the kingdom. Knights are standing watch day and night around the clock. A rebellion erupted in Estonia, and suddenly Diana was branded a traitor. Death itself was on the table. Meanwhile, Theo rushed to the hotel, apologized for the abrupt visit, spilled the emergency, and pushed for one thing, renting the whole place. The girl swore she'd move every single guest and foot every bill. Then the hotel owner, Ingrid, clearly had no clue what was going on. Theo snapped back that it was a state secret, no details, no questions, and demanded she keep her mouth shut about everything unfolding right here. In that huge room, Willie threw up a protective spell and told his brother, no one's getting in to eavesdrop anymore. Gilbert nodded, praising the wizard's sharp caution. Diana stepped forward and declared, loud and clear, that she was the Princess of Estonia, while Gilbert introduced himself as the commander of the First Order of Knights from the Mandastian Kingdom. Everyone already knew the princess's hell in that dungeon, and they were screaming with relief that she'd made it out alive. Diana turned to them, thanked them for watching over her, and crowned Willie as her savior. Count Pavel froze at the news. Rebellion had burst across their country, and the nightmare kicker was that Diana had been named its leader. Gilbert said the uprising might be small, but it won't last because they'll crush it soon. Yet right now, the rebels are moving fast. They're trying to imprison Diana, and they've already seized the castle. The princess demanded to know what happened to her people, and thankfully, almost none were wounded or dead. The uprising had struck with eerie restraint. What shocked everyone most was that Tobias, the kingdom's first knight, pointed at Diana, blamed her for the rebellion, and then publicly dangled a reward for her. Diana was stunned by her brother's betrayal, and even Count Paul couldn't wrap his head around how anyone could toss those accusations while they were still stuck in the dungeon. Everyone was like, yeah, these accusations are totally insane. There was no way the princess could have planned a rebellion while she was busy fighting for her life. Zik added that she volunteered to be bait for the dungeon's terrifying boss, throwing herself into danger to protect the others. She always put people first. Gilbert didn't buy a single word of her guilt. He was sure the enemies had tossed her into the dungeon just to erase her. Zik finally realized Willie had been talking to Gilbert the whole time, and Tobias's accusations suddenly looked wildly fishy. Everything screamed that the prince just wanted to shove his sister out of the way, cooking up this whole tale about a rebellion and her dying in the dungeon. Everyone could see Tobias had a hard, stern nature, but nobody understood why he despised his sister so fiercely, especially since she never even tried to claim the throne. Gilbert warned Willie not to say stuff like that in front of the princess, and Willie snapped back with a quick apology, saying he'd just been seeing everything through a slightly different lens. Diana confessed she doesn't want people tearing each other apart, and she flat out refuses to believe her brother could ever do something like that because she's got nothing to answer for. Gilbert told her to breathe, swore he'd dig up the truth, and reminded her that a betrayed kid shouldn't have to suffer like this. Even if everyone's wrong about Tobias, Diana's still a princess from another kingdom, and Willie made it crystal clear, keeping her hidden is playing with fire. But Gilbert swore he wouldn't sleep a wink if he helped send an innocent girl to the gallows, especially since she was a friend of Zik's. Willie nodded along with his brother and didn't push back, because the moment he saw what Diana could do, he knew she wasn't anything like Tobias had painted her. Then Willie finally admitted it. He's running his own investigation, and it probably ties back to the Kingdom of Estonia, so the Count helping with Diana would only give him an extra edge. Gilbert didn't want to gamble with the girl's life or set Zik off, so he held back. Then the young magician turned and thanked his relatives for all their support. Count Pavel was actually grateful too, and Willie hurried to the princess to ask for the artifact that let her reshape her appearance. The wizard leaned in and told him, there's a master in this city who can handle magical tools, but to disguise the artifact again, it has to be repaired first. While Willie was headed for the master, Gilbert went into full report mode, but he had no idea how to explain why he was secretly hiding the princess. Then Willie blurted out the plan. Everything will fall into place if Diana jumps in, because she's a special kind of girl, and you can always count on her. The magician lured her to the Abel family estate, promising that once the amulet was restored, she'd have a place to vanish, hide, and wait out the coming danger. Diana felt safe with Zeke at her side, while Willie had to tie up a past problem that had been haunting him for years. Before he left, he shot Trika one last look, and said he had to speak to one more super important person. Right then, Camel lay sprawled and unconscious, and the sting of defeat came rushing back. He finally admitted Daniela was right. He really was a worthless failure. Camel's only regret burned like fire. He couldn't protect the princess, and after that crushing humiliation, he swore he didn't want to die. When the knight finally snapped back to his senses, fear hit him hard. Diana stood right in front of him, staring. She shouted at him to stay still, but Pal insisted she back off. Even after everything, the princess lit up for real when she saw him still breathing, and Camel froze completely, because her tears left him with no idea what to do. Willie told them flat out he purposely refused to heal the knight's wounds, because one slip and he'd do something reckless, and now it was time to talk about the assassination attempt, right there in the dark dungeon. The magician snapped, Camel, listen, guards are everywhere, and the second you try to slip out, they'll snatch you up on the spot and punish you fast. Zick clocked it instantly. His uncle didn't just act strict and brutal anymore, because now he wasn't family. He was the deputy commander of the 3rd Magical Squad. Camel didn't know how to act, but he wasn't about to bolt. He felt every bit responsible for what happened in that dungeon. The young knight swallowed his pride and apologized for his foolishness. He admitted he'd messed up big time and was ready to take any punishment coming for him. But the truth hit him. He barely knew anything at all, and Willie was already calling him a fool for only choosing to cooperate now, when escaping was already out of reach. At first, the mage demanded the exact moment Camel and Daniela truly joined forces, and Camel snapped back that it happened in the dungeon, right when Daniela started suspecting Willie of kidnapping the princess. Willie couldn't believe it. How was Camel just taking her word without double-checking her accusations? Graf Pal made it crystal clear. The princess's court is packed with hand-picked aristocrats, and if anyone questions their loyalty, it's basically the same as spitting in the royal house's face. Those words hit the magician like a spark, and he started to think, what if Daniela, too, came from the aristocracy and wanted Diana gone so she could grab power for herself? Pal spat that the girl was a traitor and a supporter of Prince Tobias, and right then, Willie started snapping together the whole truth, while Camel just kept playing obedient tool. Then the wizard leaned in and demanded what he knew about the uprising. Everyone claimed the princess was secretly leading. Camel was completely stunned. This sounded like pure nonsense to him, and he couldn't wrap his head around the fact that young Diana had gone and organized a rebellion. But Willie refused to trust a single word, and Camel, ignoring his wounds, started waving his hands like crazy, furious at the accusations thrown at Diana. He said he'd spent all that time with her, so he knows for a fact she'd never sink low or do something vile, and she didn't even lash out at the one who betrayed her. Willie told him, don't sweat it, nobody here thinks Diana's a traitor, but the mage still couldn't shake his suspicion of the very person who once tried to kill him. Camel pushed the idea that he could prove his honesty with the magic of truth, and Willie finally admitted, yeah, maybe it wasn't a terrible plan after all. The wizard leaned in and swore he could dive straight into Camel's mind and pull out the full truth, only if Camel gives him the green light. The knight's fear was screaming in his chest, but Willie leaned in and calmed him. No one's cutting his head open, because there's a special artifact that pulls memories out. But it hasn't been used on liars yet, so the fallout could hit in ways nobody can predict. Zick tried to jump in, but Willie cut him off with a single gesture. This was the only way to dig out the truth, and if Camel really was guarding the princess, the evidence would surface. The wizard stared at the knight, hunting for one thing: would he gamble his life for the truth? The princess couldn't bear to see Camel hurt, so he clenched his courage and announced, I'm going to prove that Diana is innocent. Camel was done living with his regrets. He was desperate to make things right and finally step up as the true defender, because he couldn't stand being the guy who kept ruining everything. Willie applauded his grit, and at last, time had come to start pulling memories out of the young knight's mind. Then the wizard slammed the truth down. The teleportation stone was shattered, nothing could be done for now, and chaos was everywhere, and Camel was left completely baffled. Willie shot him a calm grin and said the artifact wasn't dangerous, yet it hadn't hurt anyone at all, but Camel still boiled over, screaming that Willie had scared him for no reason. But Willie had to remind him, Camel once tried to blast him to pieces in that dungeon, so yeah, after that, he had zero right to complain. After saying goodbye to Zick and Diana, the wizard urged the knight to relocate, because the magical artifact needed to be used somewhere else. The princess was trembling, but Zick leaned in and soothed her. Uncle Willie may snap with harsh words, yet he's a good man through and through. Diana trusted her friend, even while worry churned in her chest, so she chose to wait it out and let the investigation prove the truth. Zick clocked her condition and pushed her to stop hiding it. Everyone nearby is more than ready to step in and support her. Something awful just went down, but she's not standing alone. Pal's right there, Emma's with her, and the whole Abel family has her back. Zick even swore he'd stay by your side no matter what, so yeah, everything's going to be all right. Those words lit a spark in the princess's mind. Maybe, just maybe, they could dig up the real truth together and face everything head-on. Zick finally got it. Beating the dungeon was just luck, and way harsher trials are waiting for him up ahead. Still, after everything, he snapped. No more deaths on his watch, and to do that, he had to power up hard. A few days later, inside Medna's castle, Julius cracked up as he read Willy the Wizard's letter, like it instantly flipped a switch and sent his spirits soaring. Willy's words hit Julius hard, and now he's all in. He figures the Abel family is worth his attention, especially with treasure on the table. Julius snapped at the servant to line up an audience with the Abel family, because that letter was loaded with astonishing demands, and he had to talk about it right away. He couldn't stop wondering what they were grilling Willy and his brother about, and the meeting was already burning in his excitement. Meanwhile, back home, Zick got wrapped in Mari and Alberto's warm embrace, and the whole place lit up with joy, because everyone knew what kind of dangerous adventure he'd just survived. Alberto was cooking up a massive party to celebrate his brother's return, and yeah, he'd already picked out a gift to go with it. As always, the older brother couldn't resist. He slapped a girl's accessory onto Zick's head and turned it into a prank. Mary lit up with joy. She gushed that Zick looked like a tiny angel. Then the boy exploded in outrage, because yeah, he was a boy. Theo begged them to let Zika catch his breath first, then promised to bring Diana in as a guest to their home. Alberto swallowed his pride and apologized, saying his father had handed him the duty to protect the princess before he rode off to the capital. Diana swept in and declared no apology was needed. She was absolutely thrilled to see that kind of genuine warmth between brother and sister. They'd already carved out a huge, safe room just for the princess. She's locked in there until they figure out what's really going on. Diana, Pal, and Emma thanked every single resident in that house for their real sincerity and steady care. Zick swore he'd hunt down every chance to see the princess, arriving with her favorite books and sweets, determined to keep boredom miles away. The princess swore she'd wait, and Mari leaned in, unable to hold back her curiosity. What exactly is tying her tiny little brother to Diana? Zick crawled into bed in his favorite room and felt completely at home, and when he wrapped his arms around Haki, he finally let out that long, aching relief he'd been holding in. Here he finally found peace and felt safe, like nothing could touch him. Even the little tiger cub adored this spot, and it had already settled into this life. Zick just wanted to snag a little magical sand in the spirit forest, and somehow ended up with way more than he ever dreamed of. Even though the dungeon sword stopped whispering to him, that very artifact still taught the boy to master high magic without wrecking his own body. He figured it all came down to one thing. He somehow passed the trial in that pitch-dark dungeon, and now he gets it. This sword picks its master. The magical assistant lunged to inspect the sword, then found nothing at all, because that artifact was locked under a terrifying, unknown curse that slammed into Zick. He was fuming over his failure, convinced he'd lost his place as a unique evaluator. Then Zick told him not to quit, wished him the best of luck, and pushed him to keep going. He remembered this sword knew something about the Abel family's treasure, and the dungeons weren't built by accident at all. They were carved to guard those riches, made from fragments of the creator's very souls. Zick didn't have a clue what was going on, but he swore to his mother he'd protect the family treasure, no matter what. But the truth behind it all was buried in mysteries so thick, even he didn't know how he'd pull it off. He decided to either corner his father for answers or dig through the Abel family's books, and while danger started creeping into everyday life, he doubled down on training his strength. Zick tried to reach for Uncle Willy, but he couldn't spill the secret of his special element. He had to crack the answer on his own. Hidden threats lurked everywhere, and dread slowly cinched around his heart, yet he refused to scare the people he loved, refusing to be their burden. But there was no other path. Now it was time to lean on my family, just like Mom once told me. Meanwhile, Willy and Gilbert stormed into the royal capital, because Prince Julius was going to personally see them, and one huge decision was about to get made. They had to push through a long, tense talk, because the only way they could win was to convince the heir to the throne to join their side. While cheerful Willy stayed cool, nerves chewed through Gilbert before this meeting. He hated negotiations, and he hated Julius even more. The prince greeted them with open warmth, didn't even blink at the delay, and just smiled like, "I'm used to working from anywhere," because he was genuinely thrilled by their whole fascinating conversation. He couldn't stop talking about how eagerly he devoured Willy's letter, rereading it over and over, like the whole thing had his attention on lock. Julius erupted in loud laughter as he read the excerpts, and Willie just stood there completely baffled. The prince wasted zero time. He shot back that he had a ton of questions and insisted they start with the big one first. Curiosity hit him hard. Why is the Able family guarding Princess Diana at the cost of becoming enemies with neighboring Estonia? So tell me, what is it about Diana's homeland that hooked Willie so hard he's ready to pay any price? Willie never saw it coming. Turns out that one letter taught the prince a ton, and he vowed to lay out his reasons right away. They started hunting for clues about the Magic Academy, and that hit the prince like a shock. Willie then snapped that the dungeon attacker was from Estonia, and he'd come using an artifact forged at that very academy. But that sparks a whole storm of questions, because the academy is sacred ground even to the royal family, and nobody can just walk in. Willie was sure the killer got the magical artifact from someone inside, and that person had to be dragged into the light. Gilbert then remembered an old tale. A curse had been planted on their family. They've been hunting the culprit for years, and the body count keeps climbing, until now when a brand new lead drops, and it points straight back to the same academy. Julius figured it out. Everything points straight to the Able family's treasure, which is why they're barred from the academy. So Willie snapped into action, stepping up security and turning Hacky into a special talisman he could carry in use. Everyone knew the academy's bosses eyed both the royal family and the Ables like they were hiding something, and the Shadow Ministry of Magic ran all the internal affairs behind the scenes. At this school, the students are the heirs of noble houses, so if you act reckless, you're basically handing over leverage to enemies because every kid could end up as a hostage. So yeah, since we can't get any official info, we'll have to go a different route, and sooner or later the truth will still burst out. Julius finally got it. Asterisk, that's why the Able brothers went straight to Diana for help. Sneaky as hell, but it worked. Willie didn't even hesitate. He was ready to take any road, even the brutal ones, to protect the family legacy. And Gilbert swore he'd hunt down the culprit behind their family's tragedy and make them pay, no matter what, and Julius understood he meant every word. The prince saw zero good for the kingdom, couldn't even figure out what the Able family treasure was, and basically had no reason to rush and help at all. Willie pushed back because Academy intel could seriously help the kingdom, too, but the prince still hesitated, since even the best information always comes with a risky catch. Even with their families backing each other for years, defending the rebellion's suspect is a brutal choice, so everyone has to face the consequences head-on. Julius reread another wild detail in the letter and burst out laughing again, but Willie just stared like, wait, what's so funny? The prince admitted he didn't catch every word on the page, but he was dead sure the whole letter pointed to one goal, protecting Princess Diana, and Willie confirmed it. Julius shot out an apology for the laughter, then tossed out a counter deal. If Willie says yes, Julius will personally handle the negotiations with Estonia. The prince dangled an honorary title in front of the wizard, only for the price to be clear: a life locked in a golden cage, chained to the royal family forever. Thanks to Willie, magic tech exploded into power, and his battle-hardened skills made him basically unstoppable. He steamrolled through dungeons and hauled out priceless artifacts. His power could flip the entire country upside down, and there was nothing like it on Earth, not even close. Julius refused to let him cross to the other side. But it wasn't a wild suspicion at all. It was a safety move, and that kind of possibility should have been on the table from the start. That prince didn't care about Willie's other relatives at all. He only wanted Willie, because Willie was meant to be part of the royal family. Julius knew Willie was totally different from his brother. He was a patriot, loyal to his core, and burning with love for his country, so Julius had to strike a deal. The prince bragged that he's cautious to the bone, always bracing for the worst, while Willie, the terrifyingly powerful demon, had to be kept under strict supervision. The prince warned Willie not to treat this like a trap, because with that title, he wouldn't just enter the game, he'd walk straight into state affairs and unlock brand new knowledge. But Julius stood on the edge of his answer. Would Willie accept the golden yoke, or would he drive the princess back home, to a death that was waiting for her? In the end, Willie finally caved and accepted the prince's title, and Julius absolutely lit up, because deep down, he was always hungry to be the one who wins. He dangled a brand new manor and a whole crew of servants, because the new subject would need help, and the ceremony was set to happen in just 1 month. If Willie can't get his plans ready, negotiations with Estonia die on the spot, but the prince told him to breathe easy. That title will pry open brand new doors for power and influence. Julius dangled land on the western border, wild, undeveloped, and sitting there empty, yet Willie never saw it coming, and he absolutely refused to turn into a farmer. But that just cracked the prince into a grin, because he had totally different plans. While Willie geared up for the ceremony, Julius was in the middle of serious negotiations. All alone with his brother, Willie snapped, because the prince had played him so smoothly that he never even realized how it all started. Gilbert told Willie smile being happy is a huge honor, but Willie shot back, those fancy titles just gum up my work. But this time he stopped fighting back, because for his beloved nephew, he'd do whatever it took to rescue Princess Diana. After they cleared the dungeon, the treasure finally snapped into view for Zick, like fate was showing its hand, so Willie swore he'd keep taking care of his nephew. Gilbert pitched the idea of a mansion right near the family home, but Willie shot it down and insisted they should just buy a vacant house nearby. But he wasn't about to stay holed up forever. Gilbert snapped them back to reality. They still had to find a dependable vassal, and time was already slipping away. Willie nodded. If he borrowed a vassal from Gilbert, the prince would instantly sniff it out, and no outsiders could get dragged in, because family secrets weigh heavier than anything. The wizard started sorting through every familiar face who'd stood by the Abel family for years, and then, out of nowhere, it hit him. The perfect pick might have been Nicola, the fearless adventurer, a loyal friend, and a proven ally who'd rescued the Abel family again and again.